I'll move on to an urgent oral question allowed under Standing Order 15, and in accordance with the time usually allotted to questions during the usual period of question time, we'll allow 10 minutes for this, including supplementary questions, and the question Deputy Tadier will put to the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Yes, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. When did the Minister first become aware of the likelihood that the 2025 Battle of Flowers would not be going ahead, and what steps, if any, did he or his officers take to safeguard the event taking place in 2025?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So, in short, I found out with the rest of the island, I believe, on Friday morning, and via the media, questions were sent to me from the media. I'm pleased to say that I've been working, and my officers have been working closely with organisers to help them through this difficult period. I know the States Assembly, like myself, value the Battle of Flowers hugely, and I know the Chief Minister put out a statement at the weekend also talking about the importance of Battle of Flowers. But there is a reality that the Battle of Flowers Association does have significant financial issues at the moment and does need to solve those issues. I have spoken separately to another group of people, and they are the group that said that they wouldn't be able to put a battle on this year. That was the Battle Strategy Group, which is part of the Battle of Flowers Association, a kind of subgroup of it. And it was their decision, entirely their decision. At no point have I put any pressure either way on the Battle of Flowers Association to choose whether to put on a battle or not. I've maintained throughout that it is their decision to make, and they informed the island and myself of that decision on, I believe it's Friday morning.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The question specifically asked about when the Minister became aware of the likelihood that the Battle of Flowers would not be going ahead. So were there any early warnings that we would be in a situation where we found 2025's battle, this year's battle, being cancelled? And I'll leave the question at that.
I think, sir, since the Battle of Flowers Association had the accounts prepared properly for a month or so ago, I think is when it became clear that there were significant financial matters that had to be dealt with, as well as then they, as an association, would have to then decide themselves whether they could go ahead with the Battle of Flowers this year or not. So I believe it's been a question in their minds for a month or so, like I say, particularly from when those accounts were prepared. I made it very clear to the Battle of Flowers Association, as I've just stated, that it was a decision for them to make, that I stand ready with the grant. It's approximately £220,000. It's in my budget, it's still there. And I am hoping that a display of sorts may go ahead in the summer during Battle Week, and that grant is available for them then.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister explain what governance processes were in place to provide good stewardship of the grant once it was directed towards the association, and why the financial issues were not brought to light sooner?
Minister.
On the latter part of that question, the financial issues could only be brought to light once the accounts had been prepared. It is an independent association. They had to get their accounts done themselves, and it was only once that those were prepared that we then saw the financial issues. From the governance perspective, my team of officers undertake governance around all the grants they disperse, and there will have been governance around this. I couldn't state exactly what those elements were, but I'm happy to provide that information.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the Minister for his response on that. Would he agree that following this particular scenario that there's been a significant impact on the island's economy, particularly in terms of the hospitality and the retail industries, and could he tell us what he will do to actually correct that in any way?
Minister.
I'm afraid so. It is too early to tell or to know whether there is an impact on the island's economy or not. The reality is that throughout August, the island tends to be full with tourists. Pretty much all beds in the island tend to be full. Obviously, the future, the past does not proclaim our future necessarily. And, we will have to see. It will only be once August has passed and we can see visitor numbers that we'd then know whether there has been an impact or not. My view is the chances are that we will still be fully booked throughout August. I think there's a high likelihood of that being the case, particularly as we have other things such as Bergerac going on, which is advertising the island throughout the United Kingdom and elsewhere. As I've just mentioned, there is hope that there will be a display of some sort this summer, and I'll work with members of the Battle of Flowers Association who believe that they may be able to put on such an event to try to make sure that they're able to do that. And if they were, I think it could be a very interesting event, which will, again, in itself raise very positive questions.
P.2 Renouf.
Thank you, sir. The problems with the 2025 battle are in a sense not new, in that there's been financial struggles for a few years. The Minister has in his gift a grant which has previously kept the battle afloat. Has he given any thought to suggestions that instead of the Battle of Flowers, that a new kind of festival could be put together as an alternative and perhaps a better use of public money in the future?
Minister.
I think, sir, that's a very difficult question to answer. New things are always possible. I do know, or my belief actually, I say rather than know, my belief is that the best value part of the Battle of Flowers is very much in the building and the creation of the floats. I think they're a fantastic coming together of the community of all ages. I've said in this assembly before that, when you go to visit a float in the week before battle, when it's being made up, you will have people from 8 years old to 80 years old, all working together on one float. And that's magnificent. And that's something that I think is where the true value of battle is. And that's not something that I would like to see lost in the event that a new festival did come forward. But it's not for me necessarily to propose new festivals. At the moment, I'm working with people within the Battle of Flowers Association. I will continue to support them by helping them deal, first of all, with their financial issues. And that does not mean a bailout by any means. And secondly, helping them, if they do wish to put on a display of some sort this summer, helping them achieve that as well.
Supplementary. Deputy Wall.
Thank you, sir. A question on 2024 numbers. What is that? You must have done some, sorry, the Minister must have done some economic analysis, his department, in terms of the multiplier effect, the benefit to our economy of the Battle of Flowers as an event, as part of the overall strategic sort of view of, our visitor economy. What kind of numbers would you come up with? Are we talking 1 million, 2 million, 3 million? What's the multiplier benefit of running the Battle of Flowers?
The truth is, I don't know. That work hasn't been done since I was minister. I'm unaware of it having been done by any previous minister either. As I said, I believe, because we can see this with the other months in August, that Jersey is full regardless of whether battle takes place or not from a tourism perspective. I think initially in the early days, battle was very much focused on driving tourism into Jersey, and that's absolutely right. I think now the premise of battle has shifted to the community, away from that driver of tourism. It's still, I think, though, for many tourists who will have heard, for many regular tourists to Jersey, who will have now heard about the cancellation of Battle of Flowers, that those people will have been disappointed, because we do know there are people who come back year after year for battle, and we're hugely grateful for their repeat visiting of the island, and they will be disappointed. But I think my guess, and it is a guess, is that economically, I don't think this will have an enormous impact. I think it's the community element that is, the community is the part of the island which suffers the most with battle being cancelled.
Supplementary.
Yeah, just in connection with, the Minister has said, let's find out after August what the figures look like and see if we saw a decline, a measurable decline in visitor spend, or I'm not exactly sure how you would measure it all. But isn't that sort of shutting the gate after sort of horses bolted in terms of trying to, think of other alternatives, a plan B. Is there a plan B? And I'm not talking about Battle of Flowers, but an alternative plan B, big event which is his department's thinking about or might even be contemplating.
So I think, there's a reality in life. Nobody can see the future. Everybody can see the past. And so can I talk about what will happen in August, here today in March? No, I can't, because I don't know. So I don't know what the impact is, and nobody in Jersey knows what the impact is in that respect. The future will reveal itself to us. I think my department, through the visitor economy strategy, we make it really clear the importance of event-led tourism in Jersey, but that's very much in the shoulder and the winter months, because we know that the summer itself, that Jersey does tend to sell itself, and I'm talking in generalizations, and I can understand that there may be some people in the hospitality industry who don't necessarily see that in the same way that the department does, but in general, summer tends to be sold. What Jersey needs to do, particularly to increase the productivity of the hospitality sector, is to have more tourists visiting the island outside of the summer months. And so if I were to seek large events, I'd be seeking them outside of the summer months rather than in the main summer months. That said, we have a huge range of events, such as the Jersey Festival of Words, we have the Jersey Marathon, we have various other events as well throughout the year, Liberation 80 coming up this year, which are all throughout those shoulder months and are really important to the island's tourism industry.
Final question from the Connotables, St Clement.
Thank you, sir. Minister, I hope you understand that the Battle of Flowers underpins the main season in August, as does the Battle of Britain in September. At the end of that, visitor numbers fall off a cliff. Unfortunately, with the departure of Condor Brittany ferries, whichever way you would have wished to have gone, or myself, we have started the season badly, because French visitor numbers through a company called Montfort, which is attached to Condor, their bookings aren't there. So there is a huge deficit in the start of the season. There's nobody to blame for that. It is what it is. But we're looking down the barrel of a gun whereby we might end up losing some well-known establishments towards the end of this year. As far as the crystal ball is concerned, advanced reservations are the key, and I think it might be prudent to have conversations with the industry before August to see how we're faring and to decide whether there needs to be more input in Visit Jersey.
Sir, if I may, I'm still waiting for
I'm about to say, you're going to come to a question, Connotables?
Yeah. And therefore try and underpin the season. Would it be prudent for the future for the Battle of Flowers if we insist that either a member of the States or one of the senior officers in finance were to be part of the Battle of Flowers board going forward, given the amount of money that is invested in the Battle of Flowers from the state of Jersey?
Minister,
Sir,
a brief answer if you can.
Yes, sir, the truth is I don't know. I am keen for, I do not want or wish Jersey to become a government-controlled island. And I think there is huge value in independent companies and independent associations undertaking events, businesses, etc. by themselves. For government to become controlling of the island would be the very last place I want Jersey to go. So in that sense, I would be sceptical of that as an approach, although I do understand it would be something I'd be happy to explore. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That brings the period for that
So
question
do I
to
get a
end.
final
I'm
supplementary?
afraid you don't, sorry, because,
It's highly unusual, sir.
well, it's unfortunate, isn't it? But that's the way it works. I give a set time for it.
Can I contest that? I think that's a precedent, so I've never seen that in my 16 years.
Sorry? Well, Greffier's a very generous mood. Final supplementary.
I would be very happy to, the last speaker was very good. I believe also that, Battle of Flowers is quintessential to Jersey's tourist offering and much more than that. Whilst the Minister said that he couldn't see the future, surely he could have seen, asked for what the plans were for the Battle of Flowers when handing over a grant of such a significant amount. Why wasn't a detailed business plan and a budget forecast put in place so that the department could envisage that this kind of scenario, given the track record of the Battle of Flowers in recent years financially, that we wouldn't find ourselves in this situation where we're having to tell visitors to the island that the Battle of Flowers is not going ahead in 2025
So we did have a business plan. That was what the grant was paid against. No grant has been paid this year because no business plan has been provided this year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We now move on to statements on a matter of official responsibility. And the first statement is from Deputy Renouf, the chair of the new Hospital Review Facilities panel, regarding the recent review of the new healthcare facilities programme. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. So I'm pleased to have this opportunity to make a statement regarding the new hospital facilities scrutiny panel report, which was published on February the 28th. Last year, in various debates relating to the new hospital, two messages came through loud and clear. Members wanted to get on and build a new hospital, and they also wanted the scrutiny panel to continue to scrutinise the project. We have respected both of these imperatives. We too want the hospital at Overdale to be built. However, the new hospital facilities project, the NHFP, remains the single largest government-funded capital project in the island's history, with significant implications for ongoing government expenditure and future affordability of health delivery. Therefore, it needs scrutiny. It cannot be the case that hospital fatigue means that anything goes. The implications of getting it wrong are just too serious. Members will be aware that the government has moved from the single-site Our Hospital project to a phased approach, aiming to deliver multiple facilities over a longer time period. We do not question the principle of that approach. However, the panel has uncovered a number of major issues with the implementation. A key area of focus for the panel has been on the outline business case, the OBC, for the first phase of the NHFP, including the delivery of an acute facility at Overdale and meaningful progress on the non-acute elements of the NHFP. The OBC was shared with the panel in confidence. The government has stated that the OBC was developed in broad alignment with UK Treasury guidance and best practice, the so-called Green Book. However, following the panel's own scrutiny and its engagement with an expert advisor, we believe that the OBC is far below the required standard. On multiple key issues, it is not compliant with the Green Book and therefore with best practice. It is important to note that this was the conclusion of the panel's expert advisors. The advisor's own report, which we published as an appendix to the panel's report, lays bare the extent of these failings. The government argues that where it has not been compliant with the Green Book, it is because some elements are not relevant to Jersey. Given the multiple failings identified in our report, this simply doesn't wash. Therefore, at the most fundamental level, the panel is not confident that the capital costs required to construct the proposed facilities will be met within the existing agreed funding envelope for the NHFP. There is also a lack of detail about key aspects of the NHFP, particularly in relation to the proposed Kensington Place ambulatory facility. Running costs for the NHFP appear to have been understated, particularly regarding staffing costs, which will have a significant impact on future affordability of the NHFP. The panel has not seen evidence of a workforce strategy or health and care strategy and is therefore unclear about the decision-making that has informed key parts of the OBC, including whether the new hospital facilities programme will match the future healthcare needs of islanders. The panel has also not seen evidence of a mental health strategy to inform the proposed St Saviour's Health Village and does not believe that a compelling case has been made for this facility. The panel is concerned about the extent to which the NHFP proposals have received sufficient internal challenge, including oversight by the Treasury and Exchequer, in relation to the weaknesses of the OBC that have been highlighted by the panel's review. It should not be left to a scrutiny panel to identify such fundamental failings with the OBC. The panel's report contains 34 key findings and 20 recommendations. I would particularly draw members' attention to recommendation 3, which asks the Minister to confirm the intended uses for the Kensington Place ambulatory facility. Also, recommendation 15 requests that the Minister provides information making clear how the ongoing revenue costs of the new hospital facilities will be afforded. And recommendation 18 points the way forward by asking the government to address the deficiencies regarding the OBC when they produce the full business case, the final document prior to work beginning on construction at Overdale. In terms of what we hope happens next, our report has outlined serious risks around whether future healthcare facilities will meet the healthcare needs of the island and whether they will be affordable. We therefore hope that the government looks closely at our findings and recommendations, and in particular takes steps to ensure the full business case does not suffer from the deficiencies of the outline business case. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Minister and his team for their engagement with the panel. I'd also like to thank panel officers for their dedication and hard work in putting the report together. And I'd like to thank my fellow panel members for their work and their support for me in my role as chair. And I will now take questions on the report from members, should they have any.
Questions are for up to 15 minutes. The first question is from the Minister, Deputy Binet.
Sir, given that the Deputy is well aware that I and the new hospital facilities team have major reservations about the accuracy of his report, would he be kind enough to explain to members why he's chosen to issue yet another needlessly alarming, and I'm tempted to say irresponsible, but perhaps I shouldn't, statement in advance of our formal response, which isn't due until the 11th of April, sir?
Deputy.
So it is important, I believe, for the work of scrutiny to be brought to the attention of the Assembly. The Minister has had several weeks now to respond. All he has done is put out a short statement accusing the panel of alarmism. I think it is perfectly relevant for us to raise the issues that have been raised in the report. He may disagree with them. He's welcome to say so. All I am doing is bringing to the attention of the Assembly the work that the panel has done, which included work by a very respected outside advisor, and all the points of which I've been making in this Assembly derive from work that they produced. It is perfectly valid for a scrutiny panel chair to bring those concerns to the Assembly.
Supplementary?
Sir, it's perfectly valid for this to come to the Assembly, but he hasn't addressed the timing issue. We've been given till the 11th to come back with a full response to this, and the question I asked was why it was what the urgency was for this to be brought to the Assembly before the other side of the equation has been presented.
Deputy.
So I have answered that question. As I said, I think we have a fully valid reason for bringing the conclusions of the report to the Assembly's attention. When the Minister publishes his response, members will be able to make their own judgment about which view they prefer to take. And I'm sure if he wishes to make comments in the Assembly about his own conclusions, he'll be free to do so.
Minister for Treasury Resources.
Thank you, sir. Sir, is the chair of the panel confident that the panel's advisors fully understood the Jersey context for financial business cases and management, including structures such as the budget or government plan, and the differences between Jersey's government and an NHS trust, and consequently that any business case is only required to follow the principles of the Green Book rather than the detail?
Deputy.
Yes, so I am aware of that view because the Treasury Minister wrote a letter to us to that effect. I would say that the point about the OBC is that it is supposed to encapsulate all the relevant information. The advisors discovered that it did not encapsulate all the relevant information, and therefore they have drawn attention to that. Some information that could have been in the OBC is apparently found to be found somewhere in the budget documents, but it is not clear which bits of information that applies to. And in particular, because it is not in the OBC, it means it is not considered in the light of the hospital plans. The two things are not joined up. And that is the point of an outline business case. It is to join up all the relevant information. That has not happened. That is what the advisors have concluded.
Supplementary?
So I think my question was really about whether the advisors understood the Jersey context. The Green Book covers a whole realm of developments. I was told recently about a hospital being built near Cambridge where the budget is £3 billion. Now that is a different order of magnitude from ours. And do they understand that Jersey is different from the UK and we are not an NHS trust?
Deputy.
Yes, sir, I think they fundamentally do for several good reasons. One is that they were the advisors that also wrote a report on the previous Our Hospital plans. It's also the case that different branches of the company work in Jersey, including for the Health Minister on different parts of the hospital project, or different hospital facilities. So I think that we can say that they do understand that. Nevertheless, they are good advisors who understand that fundamental principles matter, and that they have applied those fundamental principles in studying these reports, in studying the government's plans, and come up with the report they have.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure, sir, that the Chair would agree with me when I say that islanders want the hospital to move forward. And it is within that context that I was wondering if the Chair of the Scrutiny Panel believes it will be possible to conduct appropriate scrutiny and searching scrutiny where needed in that context of everyone wanting the hospital to get built. I was just wondering if he could outline his approach, sir.
Deputy.
It's a very good question. Exhibit A I would present is this report. We are attempting to scrutinise the facilities within the time frame that the Assembly, I know, wishes to pursue. And we have worked very hard to produce the report within that time frame and to keep the debate alive. What I think is really important is that we should not accept that the need for speed removes the need for scrutiny. And so is it possible? Well, we're doing our best. I would never give up. I would say it's challenging, but the Minister himself has considerable experience of scrutiny, and he will know that all scrutiny can do is its best within the timeframes allocated by government.
Supplementary?
With that in mind, I agree, and my question comes from a firm belief in the need for scrutiny in the Assembly, so on all subjects. And with that in mind, would the Chair agree that this is a particular time where scrutiny needs to be a critical friend, and so, rather than opposition, which is sometimes seen as?
Deputy.
Yes, I absolutely agree that we should be a critical friend. I think that the thing that we cannot do, though, is pretend that conclusions that we've come to don't exist. We asked advisors to go and write a report. We gave them no direction. And officers and panel members will know that on several occasions, when we were talking to the panel advisors, I made it absolutely clear that I wanted them to come to entirely independent conclusions. They came to independent conclusions. We have a choice there. Do we sort of say that, oh, well, I know we asked them, but we'd rather they hadn't really, because they've come up with conclusions that are quite difficult. No, we put the conclusions there. We tried to interpret them in a way to make recommendations that we thought were practical and which would improve the situation. That's what we did. We may have got it wrong, who knows, but we did try our best.
Brillard.
Thank you, sir. I have, like others, been on a future hospital scrutiny panel. But would the chair agree that his approach is simply contributing to the thickness of the treacle through which the minister has to wade in order to develop a new hospital? Thank you, sir.
Deputy.
Well, sir, I referred to the previous question, actually. There's a choice to be made here. Either we believe in scrutiny or we do not. Scrutiny's job is to do scrutiny. We cannot, as I said, I think at the beginning of the statement, we cannot take the view that because everybody is tired and jaded of talking about the hospital, that we in this Assembly will give up looking at the question of value for money, the questions of whether these facilities are appropriate to meet the healthcare needs of the island, the questions of whether the running costs can be afforded in the future. It is our job as states members to act on behalf of the public. We do our best in scrutiny to do that. As I've said in response to the previous question, we couldn't bury conclusions just because there's a desire to get going. We've tried to translate them into recommendations that will improve things.
Supplementary.
Given, sir, that much of the work has been done before, does the chair see any benefit in repeating what has been gone before by previous scrutiny panels? Thank you.
Deputy.
Well, sir, I think it won't have escaped the questioner's notice that we are talking about a completely different set of plans for hospital facilities. So there may have been scrutiny work done on the previous plans, but they were the previous plans. We have a new set of plans, and therefore we have scrutinised them appropriately.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir, asking this question as the Deputy's predecessor in this role and not feeling very envious of him in that position right now, sir. I appreciate that this will have been elaborated on in his scrutiny report, but in his statement he refers to multiple key issues not being compliant with the Green Book and referring to the government saying that some elements are not relevant to Jersey. Could he outline exactly what those key issues were and why they don't regard the Jersey element or Jersey angle as being relevant to them?
Well, I think we were restricted in our timings here, so I'll have to be relatively brief in that, and he's correct in saying that the answers will be found in the report. There is a series of failings which are related to the fact that there aren't strategies in place to explain how things funding will be met in the future. So, for example, the lack of a workforce strategy means that it's very difficult to tell how the hospital will be staffed, particularly since there is also assumptions on budget increases which don't seem to match the increase in bed capacity. There's a 30% increase in bed capacity, almost 60 beds, but there isn't an equivalent rise in funding. The Treasury Minister has already referred to some questions about the Jersey way in which budgets are presented outside of the OBC rather than included within the budget, the OBC, and so on. But I think I've addressed that question already. Fundamentally, what I would say is that the advisors look for assurance. They look for the proof that the statements that are being made have evidence and justification behind them. And they found on many different areas that assurance wasn't there.
Supplementary. Deputy Gardiner.
Thank you, sir. Would the chair clarify when the panel use health facilities, does it relate solely to Overdale site, or does it relate to Overdale plus Kensington Place, plus St. Hevia, plus Canberra?
Well, the first three, because the Le Canavie is finished, so the outline business case that the government produced relates to the three facilities, Overdale, Kensington Place and St. Saviour. However, they are treated differently in the OBC, which is another point of contention. In that Overdale is clearly a much further advanced project. The commitment in the OBC, in the government plan, is to meaningful progress with relation to the other two. One of our issues is that we would very much like to see clarification on what that meaningful progress would mean and what is intended for those sites in a great deal more detail, which is what you would expect to see in an outline business case.
Would the chair share his views if the more concerns that were raised when we talk about health facilities was around the Kensington Place and St. Saviour site and how they would work with Overdale that actually approved and it's much advanced?
Yes, I think in terms of the advisor report, they were of the view that it was very, very difficult to make any conclusions because so little had been said about those interactions and how what indeed was going to happen on these sites. So the question of whether it is complementary, whether it works, and so on, that is one of the big problems. An outline business case is supposed to be almost at the point of building, and yet we do not have information to be able to say that. It's a lack of information. It's not a proof that something isn't going to work. It's a lack of information that it will.
Chief Minister.
So how does Deputy Renouf reconcile his position now with his previous voting record on the matter? And I refer specifically to his vote on a proposition I brought, P109/2022, which asked for this exact information and a comparison of costs. He voted against it.
Deputy.
I'm not sure to what that proposition refers to. I'm sure the Chief Minister will elaborate. What I would say is that I think I would draw attention to the fact that when I was in government, I removed myself from all discussions around the hospital plans for the hospital, as I was Minister for the Environment, and may have ended up having to determine those applications. I was therefore not party to either discussions or votes within the Council of Ministers about the change in plans for the sites. But that's what I have.
Supplementary?
Would the Deputy agree to refer back to P109/2022, sir? Thank you.
Deputy Scott. Oh, do you want to answer that question?
I'll look at it.
Yes, Deputy Scott.
Sir, does the Chair recognise the distinction that's been made in the project between the acute and ambulatory in terms of the outline business case? And did he reference the PAC's report on decision making that pointed out the Green Book hadn't been followed in the case of Broad Street? And has he examined the reasoning why that might not have been the case?
The short answer, 15 minutes has come to an end. Do you want to give a very brief answer?
Well, I can ignore the bit about Broad Street because I don't think it's relevant to the question, to the statement. The question, do I accept the difference between the ambulatory and the acute? Of course I do. But one of the problems is the OBC points out, the advisors point out, is that an OBC, if it's going to include something, it has to include it fully. It can't say, we're going to do this bit, and write that up, and we're not going to do this bit, but we still want to include it in the OBC. It shouldn't be in the OBC if it isn't in a ready state.
So may I propose an extension to this question time?
Yes, you may.
I can't remember the standing order.
Is that seconded? Yes. Do members generally wish to, anyone against the proposition to extend? Yes. In that case, the period is extended by 15 minutes. Next person to have to speak is the Constable St Clement, but you, I think, are on this panel. Is that not right?
I am on the panel, sir.
There's a recent ruling by the bailiff to the effect that it's not appropriate for panel members to ask questions of the chair.
Wasn't aware of that, sir, so I withdraw.
Thank you very much. Deputy Scott, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes. So does the Chair accept that the general principle of the funding is a staged development, and on that basis that some detail may be more available for certain stages than others? And is that not what is to be expected when you make a decision of this kind?
Deputy.
Yes, sir, I absolutely do, but I draw the questioner's attention to the fact that the Minister decided to put St Saviour and the Kensington ambulatory facilities into one outline business case. In other words, it was the Minister's choice to put the three projects together, even though they are at different stages of development. That was not me.
Deputy Gorst.
So notwithstanding that point, and I really want to follow on from Deputy Morell, the Chair's statement indicated doubt about affordability, and yet I think his own forward says that his panel is not saying that the acute hospital scheme is unaffordable. So if it's not unaffordable, the money has been voted in the budget. I wonder if he could just confirm that that element, the acute hospital scheme at Overdale, is affordable and now has planning approved, just because in the minds of the public they're getting all these things being brought together. That one element, I think the panel is saying, by saying it's not unaffordable, it is affordable.
Deputy.
Not quite, sir, no. I mean, no, there is a distinction, and an important distinction. The point of an OBC is to provide assurance that something can be afforded. That is what the point of it is. And what we say is it is not there. Therefore, there is no proof that it is affordable, even though it is the job of the OBC to prove affordability. We can't say, because we didn't set out to say, that it is unaffordable. We simply don't have evidence on that. But what we can say is the OBC failed in its job to prove affordability. What does the panel think about whether the facilities are affordable? I think that's a slightly more complex question because it's tied up in what are you buying? In the absence of a health and care strategy, it is not entirely clear what is going into the hospital. Therefore, it is possible that the facilities could be brought in under budget, but with less in it than was originally planned. But because it's not clear what is planned at that level of detail, I think it's difficult to say. So I'm afraid I cannot provide the certainty of judgment that the questioner, the deputy has asked for. But I would like to clarify very much that we did not say that it was affordable.
Supplementary?
Well, I'm not sure. So I said they're not saying it's affordable, but they're not saying it's not affordable. I think that's an important message for the public to hear. The acute hospital facility at Averdale, that now we've got planning permission for, with a fair wind, we'll get spades in the ground. It's not unaffordable. Is that correct?
So we cannot say that it is affordable. That does not mean it is unaffordable. Sorry, we cannot say it is affordable because the evidence isn't there that it is. So I'm not prepared to go beyond that. What I would say is that we also make very clear that we are not, in the report, that we're not convinced that the running costs of that hospital have been adequately scrutinised, and in particular with relating to staffing, but there are other matters as well. And I think that should concern everyone, not least people with a background in Treasury and so on, that the running costs of the new healthcare facilities have not, in our view, been properly examined and they haven't been accounted for in a way that that an independent advisor considered would be normal practice in any large project of this kind.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. Part of this was mentioned just now in the answer by the Chair. Can I ask the Chair, recommendation 5, for example, in the report, states that the development of healthcare strategy with clarification of alignment with new healthcare facilities is required by a specific time. Can I ask the Chair whether he and the panel may feel that there is a point where any of these delays will delay the start of the hospital, and whether there are critical points where the hospital should not be started according to the panel?
Well, I thank the Deputy for looking at the report and actually looking at the recommendation and asking a question about that. It's a very good question. What I would say is that when this project started, it would have been possible to produce a health and care strategy, in my view, that could have aligned with the building of the hospital. Decisions were made not to do that. I think that probably the panel regret that. Where are we now? We are in a situation where there is an overriding need to build a hospital. I think the desire to have a health and care strategy is acknowledged even by the Minister. I would have thought that it was possible to do some work. I would be staggered if it hasn't been done, frankly. I've been quite shocked to find that there's been no work done to try and align a health and care strategy with what's going to actually be put into the hospital, and indeed to align it with whether we're going to be sending people off island and whether they're going to be people treated in the community. Surely it should be possible to produce some information on that aspect, those parts of a health and care strategy, to inform the full business case. That's what I would hope to happen.
Supplementary?
So I can't find a button. So is the position of the scrutiny panel, and I do a recommendation on scrutiny, and it's very important that we do, the point that they can see that the build can start and go ahead without delay, which is what I think a lot of people want, but without these responses to these recommendations, or will the recommendation be, a further recommendation be, do not start the build? I think it's just clarity for people to hear so that we know where we are in terms of across the Assembly.
So I think I can say that the panel has not discussed the question of whether there should be delays to the start of the hospital facilities. Our aim, and what we've tried to channel our recommendations towards, is in the knowledge that a full business case is the next step, that the next step should incorporate as many of the improvements that we've suggested through the recommendations as possible, and hopefully that would give some reconciliation between the deficiencies of the outline business case and the need to start a hospital within time.
I'm going to call upon the two members who have not asked questions, who want to ask questions before becoming to those who have put down to ask a second question. Deputy Barbara Ward.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Deputy, please, how the expert advisor was sought and appointed? And can the Deputy also clarify if that advisor was a previous contender for the new hospital project?
Deputy.
Sir, I think we started with a short list of advisors, including the advisors who'd advised the previous panel, but we asked our officers to look for other organisations and individuals. In fact, we shortlisted an individual who had done work in this area. There is an attempt here, I think, to cast some sort of credibility gap on the advisors, and I would find that slightly offensive were it to be the case. The advisors are scrupulously independent of us. They are scrupulously independent as the company is split up into different sections. There is a section that works on healthcare facilities and a section that works on business cases. The two are not related. So whatever happened in terms of work they may have bid for wouldn't have affected them in any case. But it is also slightly ironic because we were slightly concerned that because Curry and Brown the advisors in other capacities have worked for the government, that they might be biased in favour of the government, and we sought reassurance on that before we took them on. So I really reject any attempt to sort of cast doubt on their credibility.
Supplementary?
Yeah, I thank the Deputy for his response. But could it have been seen, sir, that by appointing someone who actually had been an applicant, could have been seen there was a conflict of interest?
No, sir, because as I've explained, the organisation doesn't work like that. It has separate divisions. It's a very large organisation. It has separate divisions, some of which work on applications for working on construction of projects, some of which work on the compliance aspect. I understand, because we did ask the advisors about this, that they notified the Jersey office that they were going to be involved in the compliance work, but that there was no further contact or any involvement between different parts of the organisation whilst the report was being worked on. And so I completely reject, as I say, any idea that there was any level of conflict of interest or bias.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. The last question is about transparency and public confidence and which advice to trust. We're dealing on one part with professional disagreement on the part of two sets of experts, it seems. May I ask the scrutiny chair, because he's made some valid, potentially concerns about affordability, both in terms of the capital cost and the running costs, does he have a range from his advisors of the potential cost that the island is being asked to commit to, which is different from what the Minister and the Treasury Minister says, in terms of the capital outlay and the future operational expenditure? We're presumably paying these people lots of money on both sides. What are they saying the actual cost is likely to be? Because just more or unaffordable might not hit the mark.
Deputy.
So I'd like to be able to answer that question, but I can't. The advisors were contracted to examine the outline business case, not to come up with their own estimates of future expenditure. What they pointed out was very clear and very high risks, in their view, that the future running costs of the health estate were not properly being accounted for, that the evidence base for the supposed affordability was simply not there, and that, essentially, that we should be worried about it. And that is the message that we've tried to convey in the report. And as I say, I think for the future of the island, cost of future healthcare facilities married to the rising cost of delivering healthcare is something that we should all be very concerned about.
Supplementary.
So I was once an internal auditor, and I used to have to write reports on critical on capital projects a long time ago. Members might be quite surprised about that. But I learnt early on that what you needed to get from the person who was telling you on the one side in this and the other side that, if the chair is saying that it's unaffordable and not, it's easy to write stuff about risks, but unless you've got some numbers, would the chair agree? If they're saying it's all about risk, that's different from what it's going to end up as being. Surely they must have done a quantum of what, in fact, this risk problem is. Are we talking about an extra 100 million, 200 million, 300 million? I don't know, in terms of its capital cost. And what are we talking about in terms of the running costs? Is this something that we should all be now very worried about or not? Could you put some numbers to it? Thank you.
In terms of the capital costs, as I say, the problem is that in terms of the non-Overdale bits, we don't have those capital costs. They're not in the public domain. And so it's very hard to sort of criticise a set of figures that aren't in the public domain. We did try and get those figures put into the public domain, and we were rebuffed. So it isn't possible for me to stand here and say how much more that it might cost. There is simply too many gaps in the information provided for us to be able to do that. Again, in terms of the revenue costs for things like the increase in staff costs and so on, we are constrained by the confidentiality of the OBC. I am not allowed to say what estimates there are in the government, in the OBC for that, and so there are limits to what we can say. What we have done, though, is to say, if the final part of that question was, should we be worried? I would say yes, we should be worried. I hope very much that the Minister is able to provide some reassurance in response to the report when he comes to deliver his responses, and very much hope that he takes on board our recommendations.
That brings the period for questions to an end. The next statement is from Deputy Gardiner, the Chair of the Public Account Committee, regarding the handling and learning from customer feedback and complaints report. Deputy Gardiner.
Thank you, sir. And the PAC Public Accounts Committee published a report last Friday into how government handles customer feedback and complaints. And it's come at the same time as government launched a very important survey how the complaints will be handled around and questions around public ombudsman. And this is really important, I think, to bring to the members' attention what we discovered and also what further work needs to be done. 3 years ago, almost exactly in March 22, the PAC published the performance management report, which partly focused on how our government processed feedback and complaints. I remember it well because that, at previous term, also was chair of PAC, and it gives me great pleasure to be able to follow up on that work that I did at previous term. We found significant improvements have been made in terms of monitoring, analysing, and evaluating feedback from islanders who come into contact with government departments, and have also acknowledged the steps which have been taken to update systems and processes for dealing with complaints. The committee made in total 28 findings and 10 recommendations. For example, in 2022, we noted that 2 major departments, health and schools within the SIBs, had implemented their health department and SIBs implemented their own mechanisms to capture customer experience and deal with complaints. This follow-up review found that finally all departments are now saving back information centrally, and this initial set of data will be examined and reported hopefully by the end of this month, first time joined together so the public can see all information coming together in one place. Also, PC found there have been considerate steps taken by the government of Jersey, or actually 3 governments of Jersey, because it started at previous term, followed by previous government and the current government, to implement customer feedback policy. And there is an annual increase in public engagement with compliments, comments, and praise. We examine all methods members of the public use to submit feedback and complaints, including now we have face-to-face, because in some point, even after COVID, the face-to-face didn't come back and it is back, telephone, email, and other avenues. The PSC does, however, have its own feedback to give, and there are matters that require by our government to future enhanced steps to be taken. There has been a change in terminology used for complaints found to be unable to resolved, with the new terminology being outcome not achievable. The PSC was unable to find evidence that this change category descriptor had a clear definition in the policy, and the definition for not upheld complaints was also missing. So we couldn't find a clear definition and categories. What does it mean not upheld and not achievable? Recorded data shows 42% increase in complaints that classified as not upheld between 23 and 24. So the PSC would welcome an update to the policy to include comprehensive and accurate definition of these categories as described, so it will be available for the public and it will be clear for the public how this decision would be made. Our review also found overall increase in complaints received by the Infrastructure and Environment Department in relation to planning, 74% increase, and regulation, 100% increase. As an example, in 2024, 70% of the total feedback received for planning related to complaints, which is a significant increase of 39 compared to 70 in 2023. We have recommended a review is undertaken to establish why there has been such large increase in complaints in planning and regulations, and for the government to act accordingly. Examination of the government post-complaint survey found that approximately 50% of customers who completed the survey are not satisfied with how their complaints were handled. So the review also found that not all lessons learned reported to our government website. And it's important to emphasize, I do believe we do have a system and the exercise lessons learned are taking place. It's about how we present in this, what we've done to the public. There are some really, really good examples. It would be important that all examples, all departments will follow good practices of the departments who are presenting this already. The team within Employment, Social Security and Housing, formerly CLS, are coordinating and leading the work in this area, and to be commended. We do believe, PSC truly believe there is a will and there is a passion, and the team of this department trying to do its most to communicate and to handle and coordinate the complaints, and I believe they would continue to do this. We received really, really positive engagement. And it's really important that we will celebrate our successes and government success and government officer successes and just build up on that. A couple more things. In 2022 performance management report, the PSC concerned that the ministers are able to disregard the findings of the States of Jersey Compliance Board or fail to refuse or refuse to implement findings. What we found at the current review, that actually there is no central record of the complaints board findings and recommendations are kept. So board made recommendations, but what happened with these recommendations, how it was handled, there is no central record, and obviously PSC, one of the recommendations is to create this central record. It is clear that more work is required to build up public trust in the compliance processes. And whilst this report has mainly examined internal government-led processes for complaints resolution, it would be worth considering the merits of independent and external complaints resolution. The proper handling of complaints is crucial in establishing public trust in government, and the islanders must feel that they're listened to and their concerns addressed adequately. As part of the review, we did meet with the Public Service Ombudsman person from Northern Ireland and noted that all public services fall under this remit rather than individual bodies with individual services that we have in Jersey. And I have communication with Deputy Scott, Assistant Chief Minister, who is leading on this work on behalf of the government, and we did discuss to examine would it be value for money to consolidate all bodies that are already doing work on complaints in Jersey in one. But again, it's open and it's something that will be examined not by me, by the government. And I would like to, as a public statement, to encourage public, first of all, get in touch, submit your feedback, submit your compliments, submit your comments, and submit your complaints. The department who is coordinating are working and learning, and there was things that changed in the government procedures based on your complaints. We are still seeing low levels of submissions. The more submissions will come from the public to us, the easier will be to resolve. And the second...
So, on a point of order?
Yes?
Yeah.
Point of order?
So, I'm concerned the Deputy's not reading her statement. Is everything she's saying actually written down?
Sorry, not. Apology. I will stick with my statement. I welcome a survey launch for the government. I'm reading now.
Deputy, I think there's no difficulty in departing from the text slightly, but you have departed quite significantly from the text. It's probably best to...
Okay, can I just finish the last sentence, please?
Of course you may finish it, yes.
Yeah, apology. I welcome survey launched by the government on the 10th of March, seeking views on public ombudsman, and I would encourage public to engage with the survey and make their views known. I would like to thank members of the public for their engagement with the review process, and also officers and committee members for their work in producing this report. Thank you for listening. Apology, and I would welcome your questions.
We now move to a period of questions. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. In the statement, the Chair referred to more work being required to build up public trust in the complaints processes, and she spoke about the States Jersey Complaints Board and the potential prospect of an ombudsman instead. Could I ask her, I guess whether it's in the report or not, whether the work that the committee did led them to any conclusion as to whether the framework of the States of Jersey Complaints Board is fit for the future, or whether it is actually necessary to move to an ombudsman model?
Thank you very much for the question. Our terms of reference, we didn't include State Complaints Board because it was follow-up report on two CNAG, Controller and Auditor General reports, and PAC reports to examine internal government handling of complaints. Why I have included these comments and recommendation in the report, in the engagement with the public, it has been raised, and what we found that there is no central record, and this was important to put in the report, and also public have mentioned when we ask why only we have a survey that's showing that 50% of the public is not engaging with submitting the complaint because they don't believe that anything will change. And it was public comments. We didn't capture the numbers that the independent handling of complaints would raise their confidence.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Thank the Chair for that answer. Given the advancements that she has said have been made since the initial review on it, does she believe that continuing to advance those improvements within the current framework is adequate, or has she arrived at a conclusion that perhaps a different framework for dealing overall with complaints like an ombudsman system would be necessary?
Thank you. I will divide my answer into two parts. There are parts that needs to be done internally, and the recommendations are clearly on internal parts. And there is definitely work needs to be done externally, and it has been suggested of the type of public ombudsman, independent body, whatever we will call, that the public can go if we didn't manage to resolve. We have 3 stages to resolve internally. If it's not resolved internally, it needs to be independent, but it was public feedback, which I hope the survey, now that government launch, can capture in more details.
Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I think this is the first time I have spoken in the Assembly since 2018, when I lodged a proposition in February 2018, a clear, structured, forward-thinking proposal to bring an ombudsman. The states agreed to it, sir. Included the commissioning of research, consultation, primary legislation, and the establishment of a shadow ombudsman board. It was all set out. I'm thinking, sir, and does the chair agree, that her report is just déjà vu? A new dressed-up report, more talk and less action. Does she actually not agree? And I come from this, and I lodged this as a former Treasury Minister before the government tells me that they don't like quangos and all the rest of it, because I know they don't, and I'm going to bring forward some proposals to get rid of some. But does she not actually think that this is just déjà vu, and the time has come to bring what the civilised world and the democratic world has, which is a public sector ombudsman, which needs to start small. I proposed a shadow. Why don't does the chair panel not agree that less words, more action, get on with the shadow ombudsman, and let's get on with dealing with the public's concerns, because they don't like talk, sir, and I'll sit down.
There is an answer as a chair of the Public Accounts Committee, and as a chair of Public Accounts Committee, we examine how government handling internally complaints, and they did work, because before it's going to the public ombudsman, it needs to be handled inside the government, and the situation changed. If I would answer as a Deputy Inna Gardiner, I voted for ombudsman and I wanted ombudsman, but it wasn't in terms of reference, because there are two different things between internal handling and independent handling.
Supplementary?
So, would it surprise the chair that I haven't been asked once, either before I retired or since I've got back, of why I brought this proposition by the government or scrutiny panels? No scrutiny panels want me to sit on them, so I'm in a no man's land. I'm neither a minister or not on scrutiny. I've offered myself for scrutiny. I brought a proposition. I bring lots of propositions of well-researched issues. And so would the chair understand my frustration on both sides? Less talk, and I believe in more action. And would she not actually just say maybe she should cut her scrutiny budget and give it to the government to pay for an ombudsman?
This report cost £600, and I think it's important to also recognise work of the government that did work, because if government officials and the three government did work and improved handling of complaints, they need to be recognised. It doesn't mean that we don't need to continue and work of the ombudsman, and it's different political debate, not on this particular report.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to thank the PAC for doing this a really important piece of work, given that complaints and feedback are really important to driving improvement within any organisation. The question I have, bearing in mind, of course, that as the Deputy Gardiner has mentioned, I am overseeing a piece of work that will be building on this in terms and examining. I note Deputy Oath's passion regarding getting on with the Ombudsman, and I can assure him that I will be asking the views and proceeding in this way, consulting full states members. But the particular question I would like to ask Deputy Gardiner relates to the work that they've done in identifying that the government itself, Government of Jersey, has done a lot of work in terms of improving its complaints process, which has been acknowledged by the PAC. But it's also acknowledged that maybe only 50% of respondents would even bother engaging, which makes me ask the question, well, what do they assess as the chance, with government having put this work in, of attracting people back towards this complaints process and actually pursuing it internally, because heaven knows how many of us states members often find we're picking up complaints.
You coming to a question, Deputy Scott?
Yeah, it is a question.
Right.
So, and although I'm afraid you took me off track to finish it. So
I'm going to start again
I'll
then.
start again then, shall I? So to what extent the work that's been done by government is likely to attract the public back into the process of pursuing complaints through its own mechanism? And to what extent does she perceive that there may need to be a need almost for a kind of structural rebranding in order to attract people towards its processes?
Absolutely. There are several things within the report that government can do internally. First of all, government has rejected 3 recommendations from Controller and Auditor General. One of the recommendations to develop overarching, coherent, prioritized and resourced action plan to deliver state of duty, ensure that all customers easily provide feedback on the public funded services. When we ask people, do you know how to provide feedback and complaints? Again, it's in the report that approximately 50% didn't know how to provide. And one another findings was that numerous cluster groups have, it's about demographics, diversity, disability. There are other groups that really struggling to, they're not struggling, they actually don't know how to engage with the government provide. So it was interesting that government rejected this recommendation that saying everything is fine, everything is going well, but actually it doesn't. And this is why we have recommendation 4, that where we have underrepresented groups providing feedback, that it would be easy for underrepresented groups to provide the feedback. Another thing that I would like to mention, it's about if people already submitted complaints, approximately 50% are not satisfied with the complaints handling. It's around the communication, it's around the explanation, it's around the feedback. So the system are in place. The system finally we do have, because we didn't have systems before within the government, but now we need to concentrate how complaints are handled once they've been submitted, including all necessary steps and feedback. And the third part, as I mentioned, it's about option of independent review of the complaints if government rejected. So where do people go when, after all 3 steps that were taken by the government, they feel there is no independent body that they can turn on?
Supplementary?
Yes, just to perhaps clarify, I'm talking about the way in which government actually captures complaints and the extent to which that there's a conclusion that you've got a section of the public that might be saying, we're not going to touch them as a barge pole, whatever they do. And a section who might well be saying, okay, we recognise that they are improving. So, you know, the extent to which she's got a feel for the proportions that she's finding there.
Again, we didn't examine, we've seen that approximately 50% are not satisfied with how the complaints was handled. So it's given to the deputy response. Something that we didn't go to in details, we didn't include in this particular report, but we looked through the numbers because we felt that statistically numbers are not 100%, and maybe something the deputy can take. It was a feeling within the committee that the more older generation less trusting and more younger generation feels that they easy for, because maybe it's online, it's easy to submit. No, it's something that probably government would need to look into the ages of submission. Something else I would like to say, how it can be raised, the awareness. Government did run campaign, you said we did, and it was a couple examples, which is good. I would like to say it's only, we online as a PAC, we could find only one department that actually clear stated what they've done. It was Revenue Jersey, and we put in our report page 50, you can see some examples from Revenue Jersey, what we could find online. What people said and what they've done and how it's changed the way they worked. So I would encourage other areas of the government do similar publications on the government website at the same area you said we did to raise the trust that their complaints, their feedback was heard and changes were made.
Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. The committee, sir, identified an significant increase in the number of complaints to the planning department. Can I ask the chair whether the committee also identified the reason for that increase?
No, we didn't, and this is what we said, that it's numbers that arrived to us. I'll go back. We had increase of the complaints for environment and infrastructure department in 22-23, and the reasons we found was for region. But when we asked to put a breakdown around the planning and regulations, like different areas, this is where it's jumped for 2024, and this is why recommendation to look into the reasons, because we couldn't identify the reasons, and to act accordingly. It just came in numbers. We don't know the reason.
Thank you, sir. I put it to the chair that one of the reasons for the increase in the planning complaints is the fact that we actually, in the last 12 months, have started recording them properly. Would she care to comment?
I think it will be very, very good to check what happened in 2025, because we could compare it with 2025, and if we'll see all that in 2025 it's actually reduced, it would be great for everyone.
Conataba St Mary.
Thank you, sir. This is not the forum to discuss the comparative merits of the complaints panel or the public service ombudsman. But can I ask the chair if, during her inquiries, she listed any evidence to suggest that the reason for the lack of complaints to the complaints panel was the perception that the quasi-judicial process operated by the complaints panel is effectively or regarded as a state's control body through the influence of the state's graph?
Time for a short answer.
Actually, we looked in PSC report in 2022 when we said that complaints panel doesn't have taste, and the people feel that complaints panel will not act, will not be benefit for them to put the complaints in.
That brings the time period allotted for questions on that matter to an end.
Sir,
Thank you, Deputy.
Has it been extended yet, the question? Are there any people left, any members left?
There is one member, but there's no proposition to extend the period.
Can I
unless
propose
someone
that?
wants to make a proposition.
Can I propose that, please?
The proposal has been made to extend the period by another 15 minutes. Is that seconded? No. Any member wish to oppose the... No? In that case, the time is extended. Do you have a supplementary question, Conataba St Mary?
No, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Southern.
Yes, sir. The chairman, sorry. The chairman mentioned a number of figures which showed an increase in the number of complaints. Against what was that increase labelled? Was it an average over the previous 5 years, or was it a one-off between 1 year and the next? There's a large increase.
Deputy.
It's a very good question. When you look at the numbers, we considered about if the increase, what was the baseline for the complaints. In some departments, the baseline was very clear, and it was increased. We also considered, for example, if it was 1,000 complaints, I don't have now, 1,000 complaints raised in 1 year and 1,500 feedback put in another year, if the rise of complaints was proportionate for the numbers of submitted. So when we mentioned these numbers here, we mentioned it when it wasn't comparable with increase in total, if it makes sense, or I need to explain again.
Supplementary? Any further questions? Yes, Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. The Deputy will maybe be familiar with the expression, prevention is better than cure, and so whilst I fully support the implementation eventually of an ombudsman in Jersey, does she have any, did the panel find any recommendations about how to prevent complaints in the first place by making sure that there are not reasons for complaints and that there's better governance around public services.
Deputy.
Thank you. Most of the recommendations say actually there is a specific recommendation about lessons learned, and I think it's normal way of life on any governments. There are things that arise in, and if we've learned lessons from the submitted complaint, it will not come back, and we will have decrease of the complaint. And interestingly enough, I know that we all hear a lot of complaints around health and social care or health and care jersey. But actually, when we look through the numbers, and you could see we didn't mention in this report the health and care jersey, because relatively, the complaints in that department decreased over the years, so probably they did handle complaints, even though that we know that it's a big department and it's always in the public domain and it's really close to us. But statistically, we could see improvements, and I assume that improvements coming based on the making sure that the feedback and complaints were handled appropriately within the department.
Supplementary.
And when it comes to specific departments like the infrastructure department or environment, where there seems to be a very significant, almost a doubling of complaints over a couple of years, does the Minister think that there's specific steps that need to be taken for those departments to actually look at why so many complaints are arising? What might those changes be?
First of all, the Chair, yes, and this is one of our clear recommendations specifically to that department, because it stood out compared to other departments, and specifically around planning and regulations within that department. Because what we found that it was big number of complaints, but some of them were related to Fort Regent, which is actually, it's about the uses of Fort Regent, and it's nothing to do, it's not much to do with the specific Minister for Infrastructure. So the complaints were submitted towards the department, and it was registered on the department that it should be resolved by different stakeholders.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. Would the Chair agree, I'm trying to be constructive, that the fundamental weaknesses in the government's past and present, maybe with the exception of planning, complaints handling system, it's not just about the feedback it's logged or responded to, but rather a deeper failure, namely the absence of a coherent pan-government process framework to deal with complaints. Would she agree that had the government acted on the states-approved 2018 proposition and the establishment of a shadow ombudsman board as a process catalyst, we might now have that unified system underpinned by an independent oversight, whether or not I don't know whether actually it really matters, but it's the process underneath it. Does the panel chair agree? And does she agree with me that it's the benefit of putting a shadow ombudsman to get these processes in place which didn't exist back in 2018, 8 years on, they still don't exist. That's where really we're going to see an increase in the improvement of public, which actually helps, as the planning minister, environment minister so helpfully said.
Deputy.
Thank you for Deputy for his question. I'm trying to, I wasn't aware about shadow ombudsman, maybe. If Deputy aware about quality assurance framework that government put in place to handling and learning from complaints, because that particular framework that we have examined, it does work. It started to work recently, and we've seen the results. Nevertheless, we didn't examine ombudsman, and I believe any progress, if it's shadow ombudsman, it's my personal political opinion, not as a chair of the Public Accounts Committee presenting this particular report, I can agree with the deputy that any small progress around independent review of the complaints would help.
Supplementary?
I don't want to take up the Assembly's time because we'll take it up on another occasion, but there was a reason why the shadow ombudsman was proposed. It was to be constructive and helpful in terms of processing. I stand by what I said in 2018, and I stand by it today, and I hope the panel chair, in her capacity as scrutiny, and I hope the government's listening, because there is a solution here, which isn't basically a huge amount of money being spent. It's money being better spent by having action of a complaints process. Does the panel chair agree? She can just say yes or no, and I'll come and talk to her about it.
Thank you for raising it, and I think I'm looking at Deputy Scott, and also myself will get involved, because I believe any value for money arrangements that will, like we said, will improve the independence of the handling complaints and will not cost millions for the public purse would help.
Deputy Morel.
Thank you, sir. And following that statement from Deputy Ozef, I was wondering if the Chair would advise the Assembly as to the importance of value for money in complaints resolution. As I understand it, one of the reasons the Ombudsman hasn't gone forward is because there's significant resource that be required to provide it.
Absolutely, and this is why when we examine, we have met with the Ombudsman Association and we met with Northern Ireland Ombudsman, and we discover this particular system that they have developed. They don't have separate authorities, tribunals, and any. They have small ombudsmen, and they're calling in experts. So anything that handled by the public interest, including arm's length organizations, parishes, non-ministerial departments that we didn't examine. So the public has any public authority that dealing with the public have a place to submit complaint.
Parliamentary.
Thank you, sir. My question was more general. Whilst I mentioned the Ombudsman, is only because of the statement made by Deputy Ozef. Is in general, in terms of complaint handling, what level of priority does the committee place on value for money in the complaint?
It's a really high priority when we're talking about public trust, and we know that public trust in the government is low in Jersey, and the politicians, it's low. This is one of the ways where we can gain public trust by actually listening to the public, understanding their concern, and, if possible, acting accordingly.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Did the panel explore, in terms of even, albeit related to value for money, the possible linkage between a failure to deal with complaints and government ultimately having to settle legal action?
Deputy.
I didn't look into this.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions? Yes, Conrad St Mary.
Yes, related supplementary, if I may, sir. On the question of the value for money, question raised by Deputy Morel, can I ask if the panel considered the present costs of running the complaints panel, if those costs could be identified within the budget of the statescraft, and also whether, if that aspect was pursued, whether they took account of the saving that would be achieved in government resources in the departments concerned, on the basis that the Ombudsman procedure being much simpler would avoid the lengthy expenses that would necessarily be involved in a complaints panel hearing as now constituted.
Thank you. And the answer is that we looked into specifically at within the government internal handlings, nothing from outside. And this is why we just mentioned what was the difference between our review in 2022 and 2024-25. And this is why was a conversation with Deputy Scott that taking over, and this is my understanding that she's now looking into the cost of the complaints and the police authority and various tribunals. We have lots of different small panels, boards, authorities that are handling complaints. And from my understanding and my conversation with Deputy Scott, this will be looked at what does it cost now, all this administration in total.
Any further questions for Deputy Gardiner? That brings that period of questions to an end. So before we start public business, a decision needs to be made about whether to reduce the minimum lodging period in respect of a matter listed on the order paper, namely an amendment to a National Day for Jersey, P6, lodged by Deputy Tadier. Deputy, do you wish to make the proposition under Standing Order 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow this matter to be debated at this sitting? Oh, he's gone.
So,
He's not
as
here.
Deputy not of the Assembly, can I raise a question, and I would be welcome your ruling?
Yes.
We have a busy order paper, and we know that the major, we have lots of amendments around senators.
Yes.
Can I propose, and at some point when, if we will look today through everything that we have on order paper and go through the business today from the shipping going down, and actually the senators' debate will be starting probably tomorrow morning, and whatever it will last, and it will be full item on maybe over 2 days.
So your proposition is that the senators, the debate in relation to senators take place last and everything else is dealt with before then. Is that your proposition?
My proposition, yeah, for where I look at the order paper and time of today, I think that within probably the next 2, 3, 4, whatever hours, we can deal with it, and to start fresh with the senators' debate tomorrow, first or second thing in the morning, and to go through debate over whatever days it takes.
Yes. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir, and I reserve the right to speak.
Yes. So you want, just to be clear, the proposition is that all the business is dealt with before the debate on senators, including National Day for Jersey and everything else? All the business, that's the proposition.
Yes, sir.
You think that'll be done in an hour and a half, do you?
As much as possible, and maybe something small will be left for tomorrow morning. We'll see how it's going, and the senators' debate will be big and long, and
All right. Well, do you want to speak briefly on this proposition?
I think she just did, sir.
Sorry?
I think that I will just make this. I will make this proposition as it is, because I do believe that we had long day, we had questioning today. I look at the other paper. There are things that will take some time. There are things that will take less time. But knowing that type of senators' debate is usually very, very long, and taking lots of, it will be very good to have it together and just get through the old business before we talk about senators.
Deputy Morell, you wish to speak on the proposition?
Yes, please, sir. Thank you. No, I just wanted to put the opposing opinion.
Yes, you're speaking on that now, yes.
Yes, if possible. I disagree with Deputy Gardiner. I think the order paper is set. We have the order paper. I know there are members of the public who are interested particularly in this debate and will be waiting for this afternoon to hear that debate. Often it is the case that there are important items on the order paper which capture the public's imagination, and I know this has happened many times. The public come here on the Tuesday expecting that item to be debated, but actually it's halfway down the order paper and won't be debated till Wednesday or Thursday. And I know many times members of the public have been disappointed because they can't then make the Wednesday or the Thursday. Today, we know that the senatorial proposition is definitely capturing some elements of the public imagination, sir. People will have taken time off either to be present here or listening. Maybe they're not, I can't see, sir, but or listening.
They were. I think they've all gone now.
They've all gone now. They heard I was speaking, sir. And you know, or watching online, etc. And I just think, you know, the order paper has been set for some time now, so people will have got ready. I'm sure Deputy Miller's prepared for today, and indeed by moving it, especially given that it's moving all the other items on the agenda, it makes a significant difference to people's preparation. That doesn't include me, sir. I know one of those items is myself presenting a proposition on the order paper. I am ready to go today if needed, so I'm not counting myself in that. But I just think it's not right for us to, particularly with regard to the public, mess the public around in this way, sir.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I would just echo that. I've been preparing to public business to the order paper set, and we've got things I would like to speak on and I would like to finesse, and I wouldn't like them dealt with quite yet. So I would like the order paper respected, and members should have circulated any desire prior to this. So I will be calling for the appellate if it's called, and I'll vote against.
Yes, Deputy Joseph.
Sir, thank you. I was going to just do a slight amendment to Deputy Gardiner's proposition, because if we can't get through all the other business today, we can put it at the end of the order paper. And I was just going to say to members, and some members might not like this, but actually it could send a good message to the public that we're getting the business of government done first, and the things we need to actually get on and actually going to make changes for islanders, and tomorrow we can talk about ourselves. And so I think we can talk about ourselves tomorrow, if I may say so, sir, because I've done some polling amongst my constituents and I know what they think. And I think they want us to hear to get on with business, and let's deal with the esoterical issues of senators and all the rest of it, international standards and the rest of it. Let's deal with that tomorrow, because all these people that really want senators, they can be up in the gallery maybe, because they're not up there today.
Are you actually proposing an amendment?
I'm proposing just a very slight. Let's see how we go. Hopefully we can get through the business of the day today. Hopefully we can get the business of the day today.
Sir, is that within standing orders, letting us see how we go as to whether an amendment is
Well, I think he's not proposing an
this,
amendment. Deputy Tadier, do you want to speak on this?
Yeah, so the immortal words is I wasn't going to speak, but I think that last comment there is a bit glib. Just because there aren't people in the gallery doesn't mean there are not people listening at home or listening online. And secondly, I think it is disrespectful for those who have got amendments or potentially waiting for permission to have their amendments taken at this sitting, because I think members are planning their workloads, and speeches are being written or prepared, and other speeches haven't been written or prepared because that was going to be done later on in the week, sir. So I think you very much stick to the order that it's in, and I don't think you can say just it's government business first. I mean, if the Deputy wants to make that proposal for future to PPC, that government should have their business dealt with first. But I think he'll get a strong reaction from backbenchers and non-governmental members to that suggestion.
Right, the debate is closed. Deputy Garland, do you wish to reply?
It's just a call to the appel.
Appel has been called for. Those in favour of putting the debate on senators to the end of the order paper will vote in favour. For, and those against will vote conch. I invite the greffier to open the voting. Four members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Are there any remote votes? In the remote votes. All right. So the vote is 18 votes pour, 24 votes conch, and 1 abstention.
Can we have the names, please, sir, of the 18? No, can we have the name of the 18,
yes,
sir?
Yes.
Those members voting pour the Connotables St Bernard, Trinity and St Saviour, and deputies Southern, Ayer, Alves, Gardiner, Mesick, Joseph, Coles, Porray, War, Miles, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Rose Binet, Wilson and Andrews.
Before we start that debate in relation to senators, a decision needs to be made about reducing the lodging period in respect of a matter listed on the order paper, namely an amendment to a national day for Jersey, P6, lodged by Deputy Tadier. Deputy, do you wish to make the proposition, understanding Order 26.7, the lodging period be reduced to allow your amendment to be debated at this sitting?
I do, please, sir, and in doing so, I will obviously make the case just very briefly and apologise to the Assembly for not having got it in for the 2-week deadline. I was somewhat caught out by not realising how much time I had, partly because it was a ministerial proposition which hadn't necessarily clicked, so it's a 2-week lodging for amendments rather than 1 week. I do believe it's a matter of public interest in the sense that it will allow us to have a more holistic debate, and it's something which I've discussed extensively with the Minister, who I understand is is prepared to accept the amendments.
That's right.
So I leave it with the hands of the Assembly.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? All those in favour kindly show. Thank you very much. the proposition is adopted and the lodging period is reduced.
So there is one other thing. Could I just raise an issue? I'm being asked by members about the statement I'm due to give on behalf of the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie. That will be given on the 20th of March, which I believe is Thursday.
Yes.
That's Journée de la francophonie, sir, which is a similar thing to a French equivalent of Commonwealth Day, I suppose. So that's why I'd like to give it on that day, and I think we'll still be here with the good wind.
Yes. The next item and the first item of public business is the proposition reinstatement of senators lodged by Deputy Miller. The main respondent is the chair of the Pub Privileges and Procedures Committee. There are 5 amendments which have been lodged by Deputies Coles, Mezek, PPC, Deputy Moore and Deputy Tadier. Deputy Miller, do you accept any of the amendments?
No, sir.
Thank you. Before we start, I remind members that in accordance with Standing Order 89A, any matter coming or arising before the States which relates to alteration of the membership of the States must be decided by a majority of members. In other words, there need to be 25 members or more voting in favour of this proposition, which also applies to amendments to it. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion, A, that the office of Senator elected on an island-wide basis should sit alongside the offices of Connétable and Deputy in the States Assembly, and should be reinstated by removing 1 deputy from each of the 9 electoral constituencies and substituting 9 senators in their place. And B, to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to bring forward the necessary legislative amendments to give effect to this proposition in time for the general election in 2026.
Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. Sir, firstly, I would like to start with some thanks. I'd like to thank the constituency support team for their help in organising the public meetings that were held in each of our 12 parishes to discuss the reinstatement of the island-wide mandate. Those meetings would not have happened without their support. I'd also like to thank the constables and their teams for hosting and facilitating and helping promote them, those of you who did so. And I'd like to thank all States members who came along to listen and participate. I think the vast majority of you attended at least one, and especially I'd like to thank those who came to more than one. And special mention has to go to Deputy Aye, as well as Deputy Gardiner, but also Deputy Mezek and Deputy Farnham. I'm grateful for your interest in the subject and for coming to listen. In particular, I'd like to thank all those members of the public who came out on dark, wet and wintry evenings to participate and share their views, and to all those who have written to me about the proposition. And I will return to the subject of the public meetings later. I do feel a slight conflict in bringing this proposition. Generally speaking, I'm a firm believer that there is only one direction of travel, which is forwards, and there is an element of going backwards about this proposal. I also believe, however, that if you make a mistake, then you should fix it. And I believe that many people consider the removal of the island-wide mandate to have been a mistake. The proposition seeks to return the office of Senator to the Assembly. It's relatively simple and proposes doing this by removing 1 deputy from each of our 9 districts and creating 9 senators. I'd emphasise, however, that the name is less important than the fact that these 9 members would be voted on by all islanders, the so-called island-wide mandate. When I campaigned in the 2022 election, many people told me that they were unhappy, disappointed, or even angry that the island-wide mandate had been lost. As a result of the depth of feeling, I included the return of senators as a specific commitment in my manifesto, the one that was delivered to all households in the district. Since the election, people across the island have consistently told me that they wanted to see the return of the island-wide mandate. And it's important that we listen to members of the public, and not just to theorists, commentators, and other politicians, and particularly not just to those outside the island. Regardless of electoral or political theory, it seems to me that the public, and this is what I heard in the meetings, the public have a clear view that those elected island-wide have a different and wider perspective and a mandate to act in the interests of the island as a whole, and not just their district constituents or their political supporters. Time and again, the word disenfranchised has been said. There are members of the public who feel a genuine sense of loss, of influence and voter power. Where they've previously been able to exercise more than 10 votes, some have as few as 4 votes between their constable and their deputies. They feel that something has been taken away from them and that they were not properly consulted. Instead, it was presented to them as a fait accompli. And just to be clear, this wasn't the only issue in the last election, and no one is suggesting that. I'm certainly not. People also talked a lot about housing. This was in 2022, the housing, the hospital, and the cost of living. But the loss of senators was a big issue on the doorstep and has continued to be a matter of concern among many islanders. So let's just talk briefly about some of the objections that I've heard since lodging the proposition. Firstly, talking about ourselves again, as Deputy Joseph has just used those words. I don't necessarily agree. We are talking about ourselves. We are talking about something that is of real concern to many of the public and which the public want us to talk about with a view to returning the island-wide mandate. Haven't we got better things to do? Yes, of course, there are lots of important things to do, but this proposition has done nothing to distract from the work of government, nor has it prevented any other states member bringing their own proposition, nor has it stopped the work of the scrutiny panels. All of those things are continuing at pace, but we should all discuss things that are of interest to the public. Perhaps we should remember that the role of senator was established in 1948, and the Assembly of the day also had hugely significant challenges, rebuilding the island after global conflict and occupation by an enemy force. They really had challenges. But the nature of our democracy and the engagement of the public will always be important. It will be damaging to our democracy, returning the island-wide mandate. I really don't understand this. It largely returns our Assembly to the format it has had for over 70 years. Are we really suggesting that until 2022, our democracy was failing? Would we really have succeeded in building the island we have, and in particular, a globally recognised international finance centre, without the political stability that is one of the recognised cornerstones of Jersey's international reputation? How can returning members to this Assembly that have been voted on by all eligible voters be anti-democratic? I'm sure someone will seek to explain. I really have to emphasise that I'm not suggesting something new or novel or inventive in any way, as some commentaries would have you believe. It is a return to the position broadly as it existed prior to the 2022 election. It reinstates an unpopular model. Unpopular with who, exactly? There is no clarity or evidence about this, and the people who don't like it are generally people from off-island, theorists, or politicians, or people who have come here and say they don't understand. There are many of the public who do support this model and really want to see it back. It has also been said, of course, that we don't have a clear view of public demand for the return of the island-wide mandate, and that the information we do have is at best anecdotal. But that is a very easy criticism to make of anything which we oppose. I am sure that very many of us have been told by many of our constituents that they want to see the return of the island-wide mandate. The fact that it isn't some form of official document or study doesn't change the public view. And on how many other areas of constitutional policy do we have a clear view from the public? Do the public, as a whole, want to remove the bailiff as Speaker of this Assembly? I'm not at all convinced. Do they want non-citizens to be able to stand for election, as we discussed in December? Again, don't know. Do we know with any certainty if they want constables to be removed from the Assembly? Again, who knows? Has anybody thought to ask them? We don't have a view from the public on very many of the subjects we discuss here, and it doesn't stop the debate. We don't seek their views on a whole range of subjects, and it doesn't stop us from exercising our votes in what we think is in the best interests of the island. And the fact that a relatively small proportion of the population may have voted for the manifesto of one party does not mean that everyone is in agreement with their manifesto, nor indeed that they have a general mandate to anyone other than those who voted for them. Nor does it mean that anyone else's manifesto is in any way inferior. Sir, I also have no doubt that there will be members standing up very soon to criticise the public meetings that were held in January and February. So let me deal with some of the obvious issues. Firstly, were they hugely well attended? No, clearly not. Some were better attended than others, but no, hundreds of people did not attend each meeting. St Clement did, Greville did very well, Constable. Some did better than others, as I say. And I take some responsibility for that, for not doing a better job of promoting them. It was more difficult than I expected. I'm not an expert user of social media and made assumption about how quickly details might spread. I relied too much on a JEP article and media coverage was late in the day. I had hoped that many members would help spread the word in your networks, and I am grateful to those of you and the constables who did. It is also always difficult to find a time that suits everyone, and timing was not always right. Secondly, were those who attended representative of our community as a whole? Again, no. The majority of those who attended were older people. But as we know, it is older people that are most likely to vote. So those meetings were perhaps representative of those among our community who do actually vote, election in, election out. Despite that, sir, I'm not going to accept criticism of those meetings. I made an effort, imperfect as it may have been, to engage with the public in person and not via social media polls. I think I spent some 25 hours of time attending them and speaking with people. Members had plenty of time to conduct their own research and take soundings if they were not satisfied by the outcome of the meetings or who attended them, and if they were minded to do so. Overall, however, I calculate that some 150 people came out to talk about the subject. Those of you who attended will, I hope, agree that many of those people showed real passion and determination about the subject. There were a handful, maybe around 6 in total, I would say, who spoke against the island-wide mandate, again, some passionately, but the overwhelming majority were in favour of reinstatement of the island-wide mandate. This is also reflected in the views of people, over 30 of them, who have written to me about this. Again, only 2 have been in opposition, and all the others were in favour. So if you can bear with me just one moment till I show you. I recently received a letter enclosing, I think, something that's really quite old school. I haven't circulated it because I didn't have consent to do it, but it is effectively a kind of old school petition. It was sent to the members of St Lawrence, St John and Trinity by parishioners. I reckon there's about 70 or 80 names, some of them are couples. A similar list, I believe, has been sent to the deputies in St Mary, St Juan and St Peter. And I'm told by those who organised this letter that roughly 10% of people who were approached did not want to sign. So I do believe there is huge support for this. Some people, of course, wanted more senators, a return to the dual elections that Deputy Tadier is going to propose, rules around who should be ministers, timing of terms for senators. But this proposition is simply to return 9 members elected on an island-wide basis to this Assembly in 2026, and I believe that that is achievable within the time available. So several people have also commented on the referendum conducted in 2013. It had a turnout of just 26%. I have discussed this with the Chief Statistician, and his view is that it is not statistically robust because we know nothing about the characteristics of those who participated other than the parish in which they lived, and it can't be relied on as being indicative of the views of the public as a whole. So one thing we talk about reasonably frequently in this Assembly is the question of consultants. People from outside the island coming here and telling us we're getting it wrong or telling us what to do. But that does seem rather to be what's happened here. The changes have been made because people outside Jersey don't like our system. Electoral reform must be made with the consent of the public and not just to satisfy political and electoral theories. As someone said to me, the public don't care about the Venice Commission. It must work for Jersey and not just to satisfy those looking in from outside. We also talked about low voter turnout, and the public are equally concerned. The public are also concerned about the fact that we have low voter turnout. And perhaps we all need to think more about how we address that issue, because clearly removing senators has not improved matters. The turnover went down at the last election. So perhaps if we are going to look to other standards, international standards in electoral reform, or look at other Commonwealth models, we could look to see what they do about voter turnout. One of the criticisms we have heard about Jersey's system is that people don't understand it, that people coming to Jersey from other places don't understand and find it difficult. Now, that may be less because they don't understand the concepts of senators and deputies and constables. It may be because they have come from jurisdictions which do not have the type of open and fair and reliable elections that we have, from jurisdictions where there is abject lack of faith in government and politicians, and where people just don't vote. And that is a challenge for all of us. But perhaps we could look at what other countries do. We heard in December that Australia requires people to be an Australian citizen merely to vote. We also learned, to my surprise I have to say, from Deputy Coles, that in the UK you have to be a British citizen to vote. I've never really thought about that, having been a British citizen. Both of those countries have large immigrant populations. So perhaps the way to deal with low voter turnout and the lack of understanding is to require people to have citizenship to vote. And that way, education about our system can be part of the citizenship test, and people will understand both how they vote, why they should vote, and that the expectation that they should vote. I'm just making a suggestion. I also last week met some Australian parliamentarians who were entirely supportive of their system of compulsory voting. That was also mentioned at one of the, more than one of the meetings, I believe. But again, I'm just mentioning that. Someone said they had visited Australia, they had thought the system of compulsory voting was suspect, but they had noticed that they went to the pub the night before the poll and everyone in the pub was talking about who they were going to vote for. But none of those things are things that could be done without consultation and discussion with the public. I'm just simply putting them out there as possibilities. But removing senators and the island-wide mandate has not helped. One of the reasons for the change was the difficulty in understanding our system, particularly those who are new to the island. And we have to remember that the structure of our assembly, our governmental structures, and our voting systems have developed over a very long period. We have, after all, some 800 years of constitutional autonomy. Many of our laws are different to those in other jurisdictions, including the UK, and are confusing to people when they come to live here. For example, property law. When you buy your home, instead of signing a conveyance or a contract, like many other jurisdictions, you come to court only on a Friday afternoon and take an oath to observe the contract rather than signing it. That is baffling to people coming to the island. Contract law. Objet and cause are not familiar to lawyers even from the UK. Cause is one of the things I really struggled with when I was doing my advocates exams. Our laws on housing and work are different from many other jurisdictions. Income support is different from universal credit and may not have any comparator of any sufficient degree in other jurisdictions. Our health systems are different. Our school system, particularly our secondary school, to my view, not having children in it, is baffling, aside from the array of school models. All of these things affect people in their daily lives, and yet the thing we focus on is that they have 3 voting slips when they go to vote. I don't think that's difficult to understand. Lastly, sir, and this is where my notes get a bit sketchy, another thing that we talk about a lot in this Assembly over the last few months, we have talked several times about culture and what is culture. I would suspect that if I gave you all a piece of paper and asked you to write a couple of lines about what culture means, we would have 49 different answers. I have no doubt of that, in fact. In an organisational sense, normally, if you go to, in an HR perspective, organisational culture, organisational change, they often talk about a recognised definition of culture as being the way we do things round here. We have many champions of culture in this Assembly, and that's why we've had some of the propositions we have. Deputy Tadier, very shortly, is going to tell us, I expect, that the Corn Rights Festival is now... Deputy Tadier, I expect, will tell us that the Corn Rights Festival is now part of our cultural fabric. We've discussed this morning the Battle of Flowers and its cultural significance. Our voting mechanism and our electoral processes are as cultural as everything else. Senators were introduced in 1948. If you voted for the first time in 1948, assuming you could vote at 18, you would have been born in 1930. And you would have lived through the war, you would possibly have been evacuated, you may have lived through occupation, but you would have spent your entire life until 2022 voting for culture. And we just ignored that. We have thrown out that cultural icon, I will use that word, that many people view senators as having. Many people view senators in that light. And they miss it terribly, and they are angry it's been removed. As one person said, we have always had senators, and then we had various roadshows, and politicians came along and said we were too stupid to understand it. That was a direct quote. So we have to think about culture, and our electoral mechanisms are deeply ingrained in Jersey as they are deeply ingrained in any other jurisdiction, and changing them must be done with caution. I'm going to finish, sir, just with some direct quotes from emails that members of the public have sent me. Firstly, we do not agree with the reform statement in tonight's JEP to the effect that your proposal would make the voting system more complicated and less representative. Furthermore, we strongly disagree with the assertion that the prior 3-tier system was unpopular. On the contrary, it is our view that the role of senator had island-wide support by voters. Next, thank you for trying to reinstate senators. Stopping the public from having an all-island vote is an insult to democracy. Next, with the low turnout, the deputies who are there representing me, who got in with very few votes, will say we are happy with the present situation. I am not. I feel as if I am no longer truly represented. Next, I am all in favour of the return of senators, or whatever people want to call an island-wide option. The current system, whereby options are restricted to those few candidates in their voting district, is absurd and not at all democratic. I don't know how anyone could have believed that this would increase voter engagement or turnout. I have always voted in the past, although last time my choices were based on exclusion. I sincerely hope you are successful, as I will not vote again until I can vote for someone I actually want to elect. And lastly, I, like many, feel very frustrated that currently I am only able to vote for 3 deputies and a constable in an election for nearly 50 States members, which is very frustrating. There should still be States members with an island-wide mandate. Sir, to conclude, I believe that there is a very large part of our population who feel disheartened, disengaged, and disenfranchised by the loss of the island-wide mandate. My proposition listens to those people and aims to address this concern. It is not difficult or burdensome to reinstate. If there is a clear need for electoral reform going further, then it must be done with the public and not to them. I ask members to listen to islanders and their voters and support this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Thank you, Deputy.
may I ask Deputy to give way for a point of clarification, please, sir?
You prepared to give way?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. I was just wondering if the Deputy could clarify that not only are British citizens allowed to vote in the United Kingdom elections, but also Commonwealth citizens who are resident in the United Kingdom are able to vote. Would the Deputy clarify this?
Yes, sir, that is the case. I apologise. I believe that is the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, the first amendment has been lodged by Deputy Coles, and there's an amendment to that amendment lodged by Deputy Moore. Deputy Coles, do you accept the amendment to your amendment by Deputy Moore or not?
No, sir.
You don't. Thank you. I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, paragraph A, for the word officers, substitute the word office and delete the words connotab and. Page 2, paragraph A, for the words one deputy from each of the 9 electoral constituencies, substitute the words the role of the connotab as voting members. And page 2, paragraph A, for the word 9, substitute the word 12.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And I stand here as the filling in this first part of this political sandwich that we're having. In the 2 years that I've been in this assembly, I felt quite comfortable in my seat that I have at the front bench here. Got a nice view over the entire assembly. However, today I wish I was sat in either position of Deputy War or Deputy Curtis, where 10 eyes in the current Constable Road would not be drilling into my soul. So I think it's fair to say that I've worked with many of the constables in varying forms, mostly through under the guise of the Constable of Trinity on the planning bus, where we all have a very good, banterful relationship, where we then take our policy work very, very seriously when we come to adjudicating on planning matters. I don't know if you picked up on it earlier, sir, but the Constable of St Saviour's used to work at cinema, and this is a factor that comes around quite frequently on the bus. Not at all. And I have to pay special homage to the Constable of Grouville. That's mostly because he's my left home this evening, sir. Also, the fine relationship that the Constable of St Martin had with my mother, they used to work together many, many years ago. So it's quite small world how this becomes. And I have this directly apologised to the Constable of St Mary's for what's about to become within my speech, as unfortunately his is the smallest parish, and unfortunately that does create the imbalance of voter equity. And so I am very sorry to the constable that unfortunately it is mostly his parish that skews the numbers. Sir, I have been asked by some people, why have I brought this? And so, unfortunately, sir, it's because P2 had been brought. The asking to return to the senators has then instigated this debate again. I was quite comfortable with my party's position in the last assembly when they took the compromise agreement, which was to remove the senators and leave in the constables to actually create that balance between the parish and the local representation within the assembly. It's been said a few times as well that there is, in the building trade, you have 3 options that you can only pick 2 of. You can have fast, you can have cheap, and you can have good. You only get to choose 2 of those options. So if you find a builder, sir, that is cheap and is good, he isn't going to be quick. If you find a tradesman who is good and quick, he isn't going to be cheap. And this is the quandary we find in this debate around the position of the voter equity. You can have voter equity, island-wide mandate, or the parishes. And unfortunately, sir, you can't have all three. You could only have two. We can have voter equity and an island-wide mandate. We can have voter equity and the parishes. You could have the parishes and island-wide mandate, but you won't always have the voter equity. So when I do the comparisons between the area that I represent of St Helier South and that of St John's, Trinity and St Lawrence, you'll notice that by population, that the districts of the three parishes has actually 786 more people. But under what is proposed under P2, with the removal of one deputy from each of the districts, this will mean that St Helier South has 3,354 people, roughly, I am rounding up, but there is a decimal point there, but I will round it up, that there's 3,354 people per representative, where in St John's, St Lawrence and Trinity, there is 1,994. Clearly not voter equity. However, and it's afraid to say, but by removing the constable, having the island-wide mandate, maintaining the 4 elected members as deputies of those areas, this becomes a lot closer in number. You'll see that in St Helier South, that would mean there are then 2,795 members of the public to each representative, where in St John's, St Lawrence and Trinity, there is now 2,991. This is much closer and much more fair. But sir, I realise that I'm not fighting logic within this debate. Because the numbers, then we proved we can do numbers days on end, but we're actually talking about what we value most. Now, I'm not saying with this amendment that I do not value the constables. I think they do excellent work. However, as this debate has asked us to consider the reinstatement of senators, well, we have to make a choice. And this is the option that I'm trying to present with my amendment, sir, is that we do have a choice. We could, as Deputy Miller suggests, go back. We could take that step back because she doesn't think that what we have now has worked. We can reset. However, we could also take the standpoint that if she believes that this hasn't worked, we could take a step forward. We could change it in a different way, rather than taking the step back and trying it all again. We could evolve forward, not having to take the step back to step forward. Unfortunately, this is not gin. So, there are so many parts to the fairness of our system that bringing back the senators would establish. It's everybody having that equal right and that equal vote. And this is where I was saying earlier, sir, about how when we look at the constables and the parishes that they represent, that the numbers unfortunately just do not work for voter equity. And this is the point that I want to keep making, that it's about voter equity. I want everybody to have an equal vote. And that's why having the senators gives everybody an equal vote on those candidates. Having the same number of deputies within their district gives them the same number of votes and voter equity. Unfortunately, sir, when the Constable of St Mary's only represents 1,818 people compared to the Constable of St Helier, who represents 35,822 people, this is where the voter equity unfortunately fails. And this is why, unfortunately, and it is unfortunately, sir, because like I said, I wouldn't be bringing this at all within this assembly. The Reform Jersey would not be bringing this at all within this assembly if it wasn't for the fact that we are here again debating the senators for the third time. I'm not denying the ability and the right for people to bring propositions that is entirely within their remit. However, we now, as we didn't bring this for the first 2 debates, they were clean debates and they were defeated. However, we have a third attempt. So this is where we have to propose more of the other facts. I should say, though, sir, on balance, just because, again, I do like the constables, and I do like the Constable of St Clement. He's a very, very honest man, I believe. And he is the only constable who has that number that is closest to actually being voter equity. So if every parish could be the same size as the parish of St Clement's, this wouldn't be a problem, sir. But unfortunately, we are stuck in the situation where our parish system is important to our island identity, and so therefore we do not want to change our parish boundaries around our electoral districts. This has causes us more problems. So I'm also aware that a lot of members of this assembly will say, well, if we remove the constables from the assembly, that is the end of our parish system. So I don't believe that for a moment. If I see the organisation that exists within the parish of St Helier, with its CEO, its Procurers Public, its Roads Committee, which is then replicated across all the other parishes, these are very well-established municipalities that are very well focused on their local areas. And so therefore, sir, I don't believe that the parishes rely on the constables being in the assembly. Yes, it is absolutely an advantage for them to be here to get some of this direct access. But of course, after this, they would still be allowed to run as a deputy or even as a senator if they wished. So this is, for me, this is all about voter equity, and it is nothing personal about any member of the Constable's benches. That includes the Constable of St John's, who happens to be a Leeds United fan, and a red rose versus a white one doesn't always work. But we somehow managed to make it work. So, sir, I'm fully aware that we are in for a long cycle of debates, and also that there is another amendment to this amendment which will protract this even further. So I'm not sure how much of this speech people are actually going to remember by the time we come round to vote, but I get a chance to close after that, sir, so I'll pick up on some other points, and as we go getting longer in the day, to move this debate swiftly on, sir, I will sit down here.
Thank you. Is that seconded, the amendment? There is an amendment to the amendment, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment to the amendment.
Part 3. For the word 12, substitute the word 8, and after the words in their place, insert the words reducing the number of members within the States Assembly to 45, with funding saved on salary for the vacated seats, distributed equally between the senatorial seats.
Yes, Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. And members will be pleased to hear that I should be brief. So this amendment offers options to the Assembly, and I should state first that having previously voted to remove senators and also having campaigned for option B in the 2013 referendum, I'm bringing this amendment not because of my ultimate voting intentions in this overall debate, but I do believe that we should consider other options. And this amendment offers options to the Assembly so that if they wish to reintroduce the role of senator by removing the connétable from the Assembly, they meet another aspiration of the public, which is to reduce the overall number of members of this Assembly and provide a clear purpose for those who succeed in seeking a senatorial mandate. The reduction in the number of members, I believe, is straightforward and would not impact upon the matter of fairness, as each elector will still hold the same number of votes across the island, albeit with the slight variations in St Martin and Grouville and in St Helier Central. Deputy Miller refers in her speech to the disenfranchised voices that she has heard and that have prompted her to bring her proposition. Well, sir, I'm sure many of those disenfranchised people may well, in their next breath, mention their views that there are indeed too many of us here in this Assembly. So I move the amendment.
Is the amendment seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Just to get the ball rolling. In many instances, obviously being brief and concise can be a good thing, but I think that there is an issue here when we are talking about reducing the overall membership of this Assembly, which is an aspiration I think we should be aiming for. But to be so brief on it, I don't think gives it the credibility that it ought to for us to genuinely have faith that the Assembly would operate effectively on fewer numbers. I'm convinced that there probably are mechanisms by which the Assembly could afford to do that and still maintain members in all of the roles that we need to fill here. And obviously this would also mean amending the Troy rule as well, presumably. But is that really to just be done on the back of a relatively short explanation line in a proposition without saying how that will be done, and throwing in, if what I do have to say is a strange suggestion that we would add to this extra salary for senators without saying what they're actually getting paid extra for? Why would they deserve that extra money above any other member of the Assembly if they're not actually doing anything different with the role for it? In fact, so you could have a situation in this proposed system where the Chief Minister happens to be somebody who commands the majority of the Assembly but is a deputy. Meanwhile, all 8 senators end up on the back benches simply because that's what the desire of the Assembly is when we distribute the roles after an election. The people getting paid the most would be not those with the most responsibility. So we've seen in the last few years, certainly, absolutely brilliant advancements in the constituency support services provided by the GREF, something that when I joined 11 years ago was completely non-existent. It's been a fantastic innovation and really radical. We've even now, as when we're not on the executive side of things, we've even got premises to work from on Hill Street. Again, something we didn't really have when I joined all those years ago. Providing better support mechanisms for states members to do their parliamentary work and their constituency work is a really good way of being able to free up members to be more productive so that we could, as an Assembly, potentially do with fewer of us. But to deliver that by throwing some extra salary at one category of membership of the Assembly without defining what they'll actually do for it, what extra mechanisms will be in place to make them productive, just strikes me as a bit strange. And if we're going to argue for reducing the membership of the Assembly, which is a perfectly fine aspiration, I think there's probably many better ways of doing it and arguing for it than the way that the Deputy has argued for in this amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Just to say I do sympathise with what Deputy Moore, her aspirations to reduce the number of people in the States Assembly, and I noticed that I'm aligned with Deputy Mezek in that respect too. But the manner in which this is being introduced, I don't think is a way that actually is methodical. I don't believe that it gets the ducks in a row. Because if you reduce the number of states members, then you've got to start thinking about, well, will we be resourcing members, scrutiny panels, for example, adequately, and other committees. I think I may just flag for the Assembly that I have been looking at a proposition about amending the Troy rule and reintroducing my proposition to introduce lay members on scrutiny panels. But I do think that should come first before you start reducing the number of states members. Similarly, in terms of suggesting a manner of remunerating states members like this, I know that we already have a mechanism by which we work out the remuneration of states members, and that would need to be changed. And even as a principle, I do question whether it makes sense just to automatically make senators, ministers, chairs of scrutiny panels. It really does help if they've got adequate knowledge and a certain degree of knowledge. And I can absolutely vouch that some of that work is as much as I expect any minister does. So I won't be supporting this proposition, amendment of this proposition, this amendment for that reason. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does any other members speak on the amendment? Deputy Gardiner.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask Deputy Moore, because I looked also, there is another amendment, and the other amendment gave different number and also specified what will be the difference in deputy views between the work that the senators would do. Would the deputy advise why there are two different amendments on the same notes? Because I do also, as Deputy Mezek and Deputy Scott, believe that we need to look into possible reducing numbers, if possible, and making our assembly working more effectively. But I don't understand why it's disparity between two amendments.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other? Yes, Deputy Coles, then Deputy Moore. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Again, as well as just raising concerns and interest, I think that when the initial reform of the Assembly was brought in the last Assembly, there was actually an idea to reduce the number of states members by 2 to make the constituencies balance and be a little bit more equal, which seems to make sense. But this is where I get the concern for the number that the Deputy has proposed of removing the number of officers within here, and how that number of 8 senators has become 2, as we have 9 districts. That means one district would get an extra seat or wouldn't lose an extra seat. And so I feel there's a little bit of the gap in this is not explaining how that number is filled. That's the only thing I can make really comment on the amendment to my amendment, as I'm sure when the Deputy's full amendment of her own will come round, she'll probably be giving a more detailed explanation to how things will work. But just on this first amendment to my amendments, that number is what gives me the most concern to figuring out how we get to the number of 8, rather than if it was to go back to the original 9 senators that Deputy Miller proposed, it would have made at least a little bit more sense.
Thank you. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me. I'm only going to speak once regarding this amendment. So my remarks apply to both Deputy Cole's amendment and the amendment to that amendment by Deputy Moore. Deputy Cole's amendment is one that I am sure will have raised eyebrows across the Assembly and with the public, as will the amendment lodged by Deputy Moore. In one sense, I am pleased that a member of Reform Jersey and indeed Deputy Moore are supporting the reinstatement of senators. That is some positivity. But I'm not content that they are both seeking to do so at the instance and expense of the 12 constables. I don't support the amendment. The constables are a fundamental part of this Assembly, with the vital link they provide to the parishes and the parish system, and I do not support their removal from the states, and certainly not without consultation with the public. Any decision to remove constables should only be taken with full consultation and with the consent of islanders. Sorry, sir, I'm trying not to duplicate things. Sir, we know, I believe, that Reform Jersey are opposed to senators. Reform members voted to remove senators before the last election, and twice in this Assembly have voted not to bring them back. I believe they've also been consistent in wanting to remove the constables from the states, and I recognise the consistency of their position.
Sorry, point of order, sir.
Sorry.
Well, is it a point of order, or do you want to? Is it
No, it's a point of order on a ruling on Deputy Miller's speech.
All right.
She seems right now to be purely referring to the substantive amendment and not the amendment to the amendment. She's talking purely about Reform Jersey's mission within the primary amendment, and I wonder if you could rule whether she should remain her comments to the amendment, which is the objective of Deputy Moore's amendment.
I don't think there's anything inappropriate in it. She's making it clear she's speaking once on the two matters together, and members do that quite frequently. So I don't think there's anything inappropriate in it. Yes.
Yes, I was trying to avoid speaking twice, so I was trying to run the two together. Apologies, Deputy. However, sir, nobody, neither Reform, I believe, nor any other member of this Assembly, can claim to have a mandate to remove the constables from the Assembly. I hope the constables and supporters of the parish system are watching and listening closely to this debate. There may be a message the constables are next in the firing line. Bringing back senators not only delivers on what voters have told us on the doorstep and on promises that many of us made during our election campaign and our manifestos and at the hustings, but it also ensures the continuance of our parish system. The senators, given that they need to attract support from across the island, have historically been strong supporters of the constables and the parishes, reflecting overall public opinion across the island. Supporters of the parish system in this Assembly will, I hope, reject this amendment as amended, but I hope they will also support the main proposition in order to bring an end to the gradual erosion of an electoral system which, unless reversed, may end with the establishment of just one class of States member. My proposition aims to return a class of member with an island-wide mandate to the Assembly. It did not envisage the removal of constables, and I don't believe there is a strong desire from the public to do so. I cannot remember the subject of the constable's position coming up regularly or at all in my conversations with constituents. So I ask members to reject this amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to thank Deputy Miller for her comments on keeping the constables. Sorry. I will only speak briefly on this amendment because I want to address the question of removing the constables in the full debate when we address Deputy Cole's amendment rather than the amendment to the
So
amendment.
could I raise a point of order? I'm loath to do this and interrupt the move, but she is the chair of PPC. I don't know if I could ask the member to give way.
As a point of order. Well, is it a point of clarification? Asking her to give
Point of
way?
order, sir.
Point of order, that's for me then. Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Sit down, please. Yes. Yes.
So I think it's really important, also given the fact that it's the chair of PPC addressing this, that we, as good discipline, speak to amendments, because otherwise we very quickly fall into bad habits. I think we are debating I'm sorry if I've interrupted incorrectly, but so
Well, the commentator made it clear she was going to speak to the amendment separately from the underlying amendment. Yes. But I've also previously ruled if a member is only going to speak once in relation to an amendment and an amendment to amendment, that does not contravene standing orders, particularly in this context, because the amendment of Deputy Moore is parasitic upon the amendment, and both envisage the removal of the connotab. So I don't think that the approach of Deputy Miller to speak to both was inappropriate. Bear in mind she was only speaking once. But I think the connotab's made it quite clear she's only addressing herself in her remarks to the amendment, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
So can I finish that? I don't know if that was a biological intervention or a legal one, sir.
Well, but, I thought you'd made your point of order.
Yeah, the point of order is that I think here, for example, we're talking about simply the number, whether it should be, I think it's 9 or 8 is the number, and it's specifically not about whether or not constables should be removed as a principle. And I think it really blurs the lines in terms of speaking to amendments, because of course people can change their mind, they might hear something subsequently in a different debate. So certainly for my part, I will always try to address the issue in front of us, and I don't think one should stand up and say, because I'm only going to speak once, I want to talk about everything under the sun that includes, that relates to electoral reform, so it doesn't seem to be good practice.
Well, I've made my ruling on these issues, and I don't want to revisit it, having made it twice now. Yes, Constable.
I apologise for any confusion, but I did say that I was
You did.
only speaking briefly on this amendment
did,
because I was going to speak fully on the other amendment, but actually I can sit down and wait for the next amendment of Deputy Moore's to speak, if that's... it doesn't muddy the waters. I'll wait to speak on the next amendment from Deputy Moore. Thank you.
Yes. Does any other member speak on this amendment, the amendment? Yes, Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. This amendment, I've got slightly confused because there were two amendments. One is for 8 senators, one is for 7 senators. This is the 8 senators amendment of the amendment, I believe. Just to confirm in my own mind, sir. There's a couple of questions which had, and the reason I linked to the other one is essential for this part before somebody puts in a point of order, which is, I understand and I actually agree with that, is that I think it needs to be clear as to whether these 8 senators in this amendment of the amendment will form a council of ministers. Because in the other amendment, the 7 senators are there to form council of ministers automatically. And the reason that is important, sir, is I must make the point about those 8 members, if they are to form Council of Ministers, is that therefore there will be no change. There is no opportunity to remove a minister if they are acting inappropriately or doing anything inappropriate or not meeting the standards of this Assembly. There will be no such thing as a vote of no confidence in the government, or there will be, but those 8, if you can only be in the Council of Ministers if you're a senator, you can have a vote of no confidence in those 8 Council of Ministers, but then they have to form the new Council of Ministers. And there seems to be an internal problem with logic there, which I don't understand. And I think that just needs to be explained. I may have got this wrong, but that's the thing. The other point I will make is, so I stood on I always believed that we should have one type of states member in equal sized constituencies, but I compromised that in order that we come up with a better situation last time. And the reason now that we're in a position of a colleague of mine bringing a proposition with senators is that we are about to lose the equity of voting right across the assembly that we had, that has brought an assembly that is more reflective of our society, has more female members, has more members from across our community, and we have to think very, very carefully about making changes that may affect that. And so therefore, as much as I understand the role of constables, I'm a constable myself, and we're involved in parish matters very frequently, we have to look for the equity of vote. In this amendment to the amendment, I think we get the worst of both worlds. We end up with a smaller number of senators in a smaller Council of Ministers, and having taken on a ministerial role, I know how full on that is. And to concentrate that amongst less members would make that very, very difficult if they are to form the Council of Ministers. And please stop me if I'm wrong, because I'm still getting that will be what will happen. So therefore, sir, I can't accept this amendment to the amendment for that reason. Cutting those numbers won't work. It takes away equity. And also, sir, I recognise the work also of other members across the Assembly as chairs of scrutiny panels, of work you do in constituencies. So, and I'm not so sure where we should have that inequity of pay. I will say I think the Chief Minister should probably be paid more. Not necessarily this one, but certainly, I don't want to be seen to be too keen, sir. But certainly not previous ones. There's definitely causes suggested in my ear. But I think that role quite sensibly, if we can move forward sensibly here. Now I've lost my train of thought. That I think that role is so essential in terms of the sort of main role on the island, that might be the only position that I would suggest is paid more. Otherwise, we go down a very slippery slope of what are we doing this for? So I would urge members to reject this amendment and we move on to the main amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. To make clear, Deputy Ward, it's not this amendment, but the 4th amendment that envisages the senators should form the entire Council of Ministers. So that's not...
So I just wonder if when the proposer responds, whether that could be confirmed. Because I'm not sure we all
that's the position.
Thank you.
We're not voting on that until later on. Thank you. Yes, does any other member speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir, and I'll stick to what I said earlier and speak to the amendment. The amendment is essentially, do you prefer the number 9 or the number 8? So and I think both numbers have got quite a lot going for them when it comes to them, given the fact that the mover of this amendment doesn't actually want to have constables taken out of the Assembly and replaced with senators anyway. It seems a bit academic as to what number should replace the constables if they are taken out of the Assembly. But I won't presume the outcome of that eventual vote that we'll have perhaps tomorrow now. And I'd like to make the case for 8, if that's okay, because I think 8 has merit, even though I won't be voting for it. Because I think the 8 side has not really been given much weight here up until this point. So why 8 and not 9? I think 9 doesn't have any particular traditional historical roots when it comes to the senatorial elections. There's never been 9 senators elected in the islands, and I'm surprised that the traditionalists who have attended the parish meetings throughout the islands would countenance such a number, even though there's a lot to be said for it. Mathematically, it's of course it's not a prime number. It can be divisible by 3, and so it's also a square number. I think it's the highest square number, lowest square number after 2, of course. Or was that 4? I'm losing myself. 4 is the one below it, isn't it? We've already had biology, sir. I'm not going to refer to any parasites, but we are where we are with this. First thing to remember is that all these amendments, it's not our fault that these amendments are being brought. It's because of, I was going to call her Senator Elaine Miller there, Senator Miller. Deputy Miller has brought this, even though it's been debated several times already during this term. It seems that we haven't debated it enough. So I think 8 has got a historical record there, because we did have at one point 8 senators in this assembly. I think it was the 2011 elections, if I remember rightly, where there were, we went from, I think, 12 to 8, and then to, was it 6 for a while, or was it 4? You lose track about the numbers. So surprised we never had 7, because 12 is a really good biblical number. It refers to the tribes of Israel, for example. And 7's a good biblical number because it's the number of days in the week. So I think if we, 7, I'm wondering whether to support this number 8 now or wait till later on for 7. So we can have one for every day of the week. Let's look at what might happen and who the winners and losers might be, sir, if we went
Deputy
for...
Scott, your light's on. Do you want to speak
I
next?
just wanted a point of clarification. How is 7 days of the week? Oh, that I know. I've got it. Genesis. Sorry.
I didn't invent the number of days of the week, and I'm sure when it comes to the Sabbath, we'll all feel like having a jolly good rest. And it feels almost like we're going back maybe 6,000 years, doesn't it, to when the world was created, according to some.
You need to focus on the issues.
I do, sir.
In accordance with standing orders.
I do, sir. I was interrupted there, sir. So look, who might the winners and losers be in such a scenario? So let's look at maybe the last election. So 2018. I think was when there were 8 senatorial seats. There could have been 9. Could have made all the difference. And if we look at, I won't go through the whole list, but let's go to the bottom of the list, but they all count. I go towards, let's go with Senator Gorst. He was elected in 6th position. I think he needed 12,000 votes for that. Then we had another independent, was my esteemed St. Brelard colleague, who became Senator Ferguson at that point again, and she came in 7th, and then my esteemed leader came in 8th, so he's held the position of Senator. I'm sure he'll mention that later on. And of course, we now have Deputy Maud Scott, who came in as an independent in 9th position. And if only there had been that 9th position back then she would have been a senator, and the rest could have been history. I'm sure the government would have been in a much better position than it is today had that been the case. But there were, of course, other elections that took place, and I go back to one, I think it was in 2011, I've not got my dates on here, but this was one where there were only 4 seats that were available, because I think we were still working on a 6 and 6 year term, if I remember rightly, but there were some changes. So we have Senator Balash topped the poll, Senator-elect, and then it was Senator Gorst. And we had a newcomer with Senator Francis LeGraley elected for the first time, and then it was Senator Farnham. And of course, those were the top 4 seats, but there are still 5 potential seats that would get elected under the 9 system. So let's go through them. So we would have had Senator Coley, we would have had Senator Cohen being re-elected. We'd have had Senator Stuart Sivray coming in there at 7th place. We'd have had Senator Mark Forskett. That's certainly one that I would have been interested to see. And we'd have had Senator Corby as well. But in fact, there were only 9 candidates for that election, so there wouldn't have been an election in the first place because they would have all been elected uncontested. There is a counterfactual there, of course, because if there were 9 seats, you could argue that there would be even more people standing for election. So then you have to get onto the question about how long is the ballot paper going to be? because traditionally, of course, in Jersey, we used to elect 6 senators in 2 different segments. So when it was introduced in 48, I think they were even elected for 9-year terms, if I remember rightly, but it was for a longer period, and then it was there wasn't a general election at the time, and they were elected on different days, incidentally. So it depends how nostalgic you want to be, but I just wanted, for the balance of argument, to make the case for, I think it was 8 I said, wasn't it? So let's make the case for 8, and why there is a good argument for coming down on the side of 8. If nothing else, it actually makes the ballot paper a bit shorter as well. So it might mean that we have a more manageable system when it comes to the hustings. But so please ask members, even though I won't be supporting it, to give strong consideration to the number 8.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Yes, Deputy Ozer.
Thank you, sir. I am not going to find myself able to vote for virtually anything in this debate, but I will come to those arguments later. But on this narrow question of 8, and I think that members must, if I may say, refrain from making remarks which aren't really serious, because we are dealing with the Constitution of the State, sir. This is no laughing matter. This is really important, and I don't think we should be joking about this, because the public is wondering why we're talking about this in the first place. I'll come to that later. But the mathematics of it are that on the narrow issue of 7 or 9 or 8, is that when there was a system of senators with 6 candidates, on average, people voted for 4.5 senators. So they didn't use all of their votes. And that's important because of the legitimacy that you'll get in a slate of 8 or 9 or 10 people. It's very important. And legitimacy is really, really important. And I must say that I was in that election that was 8 senators, and I came 8th, and I got legitimately elected. But I was really worried about it because of the numbers, and that was kind of different because there was a sort of a number of 2 senators being squashed into 1. And on that particular occasion, you could kind of live with an 8, but even 8, sir, you're really pushing it in terms of the legitimacy of those people who get elected, I'm afraid to say, in position certainly 7, 8 and 9. It worked on a one-off basis because we were merging it. It doesn't work if we've got to vote for the least worst option, and it is absolutely the least worst option. I hope none of this gets through for reasons I'll come to later. 8 is better than 9, but this whole thing is a bit questionable in terms of where we're kind of sticking a pin in a donkey, sir, in terms of voting this, and we're dealing with the Constitution of the States, and it really troubles me. But 8 is certainly better, not for any silly reason, but it's more legitimate if you're going to do something, sir. So I'll be supporting Deputy Moore.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the amendment? I call upon Deputy Moore to reply. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir, and I thank members for their attention in this debate, and particularly to those who have taken the time to speak. So, of course, as set out in the running order, this amendment is a very narrow amendment. That is the reason why I felt my speech was brief and to the point, because it actually covered the very simple matter that is at hand. I think it's perhaps a new criticism, though, and one that can hopefully will not be made again. I haven't previously heard people being criticised for being too brief, but there we are. So this amendment deals with one aspect of the 2 amendments that are before the Assembly from me in this debate, and they simply deal with the numbers aspect. The remainder of my amendment will be debated when we get to Amendment 4. So quite simply, as I stated in my opening speech, if the Assembly wishes to remove the CONITAB from the Assembly, they should also consider reducing the number of members altogether, and that is the purpose of this debate. So reducing our number by 4 in my mind, is not a matter that requires a great level of methodology. It is simply basic arithmetic. And if we consider the workloads of various members around the Assembly and various panels and committees that are populated by members of this Assembly, I'm sure we can all actually take an honest look at ourselves and say, yes, we could probably achieve this level of representation and consideration in our work with 4 fewer members. Deputy Gardiner, quite rightly, asked why there's a discrepancy between the number of senators that would arise through this amendment versus the Amendment 4. So the number 8 is arrived at in this one. It's simply a matter of keeping to what is, I believe, a convention of this Assembly, that we have an odd number of members sitting here. So when there is a crucial vote, we do not have to look to the bailiff for that casting vote, because it can be achieved through the full number of the members of this Assembly. And so, of course, in this instance, the Assembly would arrive at a membership of 45. And I believe that the voter equity that was achieved by the recent changes to our system, which set to balance out the number of votes each elector has in their respective districts, would not be changed at all by members supporting this amendment, because let's take my constituency of St Mary, St One and St Peter. Under this amendment, an elector would have 8 votes for senators and 4 votes for deputies, as they currently do, equalling 12 votes. Of course, as I pointed out in my opening speech, in St Helier Central, each elector would end up with 13 votes because of the 5 deputies that they elect rather than 4. And of course, in Grouville and St Martin, they would hold 11 votes each because of the balance that was achieved there. So, sir, I'm grateful for the consideration of my other amendment by those who have spoken of it in this Assembly. That is aimed thoroughly at providing a purpose if we're going to reintroduce senators, but that is a matter for a future debate on the running order, and I will stick to the question here, which is simply that if Deputy Coles's amendment is adopted as amended, but Amendment 4 is not adopted, there would simply be 8 senators in the old-fashioned system without any of the aspects that are proposed in Amendment 4, which we're yet to debate. And I hope that has made it absolutely clear. I'd be grateful for a gesture to the for or contrary. But there we are. I hope this amendment has caused members to consider the rationale and the potential for reducing our numbers and meeting another expectation or wish of some members of our own community. If it is the will of this Assembly to remove the constables, they could also meet another aspiration and reduce our number to 45, as opposed to our current number of 49. And so I make the amendment, and I shall ask for the appel.
Thank you. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats, and the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes, both in the chamber and, where appropriate, remotely. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the amendment has been rejected 6 votes pour and 38 votes contre.
Give the 6, please.
Those members voting pour, the Connétable St Helier and Deputies Morell, Gorst, Moore, Joseph and Wilson.
I'll move back to the amendment, the first amendment, lodged by Deputy Coles. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Scott.
Thank you. So, in the world of producing solutions to an imbalance of power, I believe history records some quite extreme ones, including the French guillotine. And I note that this proposition is essentially proposing that we remove the constables out of the states, notwithstanding their position in the states having been confirmed by 2 referenda. And in doing this, the justification has been the manner in which the inequality of their representation of populations needs to be addressed or can't be addressed by the principles that were put forth by the Venice Commission, which I might point out is a commission that was set up somewhere by the EU that we were never part of, and even the UK is no longer with. And again, on the basic idea that it's really not desirable to have 3 types of states member, and I think there's quite a bit to unpack here, because basically there's a lack of logic. We have the constables. This is pretty unique. And yet we say, well, having 3 members shouldn't be acceptable. Our own electorate want the constables. That was done in a democratic, that was found out in a democratic way. And I do believe it needs to be respected. So if we're different as a jurisdiction, what of it? Even in this debate, we are discussing our island identity, things that actually make us special. So really what we should be focusing on is what truly is fair, what's actually recognised as fair within our community. Because here's the thing, democracy isn't made by speeches. It's made by a sense of fairness that is supported by the wider community. And within that community are many communities, and it's fundamentally unfair if one is represented more than the other. So indeed we do have an inequity that arises from the different sizes of the populations in the parish system. And I have seen, and I've actually witnessed quite a few people really kind of trying to work out how you work out a way of parcelling up super constituencies and sort of twiddle about with the number of deputies or whether you add senators or not, just to actually get these super constituencies, the resulting ones, comply with the Venice principles, whilst respecting or trying to align with parish boundaries. And you know what? I actually don't believe it can be done. And the question is, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this when, in fact, if you want to have voter equity, there are different ways of actually achieving that? Now, yesterday I did write to states members and I did discuss one principle that I've mooted before, which is relatively simple, doesn't involve the establishment of a boundary commission, another quango that when we're trying to actually just reduce their number. And that was actually having voting, that actually having the Constable St Helier elected on an island-wide basis. I'm afraid I haven't consulted with him, but I know that in the past he hasn't even supported having constables in the Assembly. And the 11 remaining votes actually distributed amongst the constables in proportion to the populations that they represent, which is regularly found out. And also that's a proposition that I have chosen to bring. I have chosen to actually bring separately because we really are being caught down in the weeds already with a proposition that has 5 amendments and has had 1 proposed amendment to one of those amendments. And all because, we're kind of stressing about these principles. So long and short of it is Yeah, why even stick with them? Well, I understand why a political party would stick with them, particularly one that's got 10 members in the States right now. And another question that we can ask about this particular system that has been adopted is, do we know if the 20% of members that are represented by this single political party actually reflects the support island-wide? Well, we don't, because we don't have any island-wide representation whatsoever. We just know that there was this attempt to comply with the Venice Principles that actually led to this multi-member super constituency stuff that trying to actually maintain or align with these parish boundaries, and it's basically how you tie yourself in knots. I come back down that I don't really see how abolishing the constables really gets us, if you know, in terms of this proposition, really gets us any further in terms of this desirability of having people who are going to represent a wider community elected on an island-wide basis, at least some. I mean, it actually gives the opportunity, for example, the leader of a political party to actually show that his political party has got island-wide support, which did occur at the time of the previous election to the last election, when in fact that happened. And whether or not that particular individual did enjoy the process or not, and I believe that people might react differently to that, I do believe there was value with that. I remember actually being in a school presentation where an actual question was asked, why did we not have a Reform member stand in Trinity? We may ask, why wasn't that opportunity given to those people in Trinity? But they had an opportunity when we did have island-wide representation. So is this really any type of solution that really takes us out of the weeds, avoids muddle thinking? I would say no, so I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Deputy.
So can I just ask a point of clarification?
Prepared to give way for that purpose?
Yes, sir.
Which amendment was the Deputy speaking to? It wasn't immediately clear.
She was speaking to this amendment, wasn't she?
Sorry, I meant to ask, what amendment did you think she was speaking to?
I believe I'm speaking to the First Amendment.
Yes.
The amendment to the amendment. I believe that we voted on that.
We're all speaking on the First Amendment now. Yes, Deputy Balash.
Can I ask a question, what amendment the Deputy thinks we're debating?
Well, I don't think we need to have a discussion to and fro. Deputy Balash.
So the problem with a debate on the constitutional composition of the states is that there are innumerable moving parts, and it is easy, as we all know, to overlook issues which can put a spanner in the works. And that's why it's better, in my view, to found debates of this kind on the report of a body of people who have chewed over the issues for hours and looked at them from every possible angle. So this amendment is ambiguous. When I first read it, I had a completely different view of what it meant. And it says that the office of senator should be reinstated by removing the role of connétable as voting members and substituting 12 senators in their place. And when I read that for the first time, I thought that's a very interesting proposal. The connétable are going to remain in the states as non-voting members, but that's going to mean that there are going to be quite a lot of members of the states, and how will that work? And so I put that to the President, the bailiff, as a point of order. And the bailiff has ruled that the proposition, the amendment, I'm sorry, is to be interpreted as meaning that the connétables are going to be removed from the states in their entirety. But there's a more significant problem with Deputy Cole's amendment, because he says that removing the connétable from the Assembly would allow them to remain in the states by seeking election to another office. But it's not just the individuals who are constables that one needs to think about. It's the public who elect them. Now, I can understand that voters might wish to think it appropriate to have the Constable of St Helier, for example, in the Assembly as a deputy, because he represents a large number of people. But unless the rules are changed to allow for elections for constable and deputy to take place on different days, and Deputy Coles is not suggesting that in his amendment, it may not happen. If Constable Crowcroft, for example, were to stand for both offices, he might find himself elected as deputy, but not as constable. All those people who voted for him to become a deputy on the basis that the Constable of St Helier should be a member of the Assembly might be disappointed to find that the Constable of St Helier was not actually a member, even though Deputy Crowcroft was. They would have voted for him to be a deputy on the misapprehension that he was also going to be the constable. It doesn't work. I think there is a much more fundamental problem with this amendment, and it was referred to by Deputy Scott, and that was that there was a referendum not all that long ago which decided that the constable should remain in the states. Are we going to ignore that referendum? The people expressed themselves in very clear terms that the constable should remain in the states. It seems to me almost unbelievable that it should be proposed without a further referendum that the constable should be removed. I'm going to vote against the amendment.
Sir, can I get a point of clarification from the deputy?
Are you prepared to give way for a point of clarification? Yes, of course. Yes, Deputy Coles.
The referendum that the deputy referred to, was there another? What was the result of that referendum?
Sir, that doesn't.
So the question is,
that doesn't strike me as a point of clarification, sir.
No. Well, whether it is or it isn't. Do you know the answer to that question? The result of the referendum?
The result of the referendum was that people voted by, I forget the exact proportion, but something like 54% to 46%, that the constable should remain in the states.
All right. Thank you, Deputy. Who wants to speak next? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And there was a reason that Deputy Coles was seeking that point of clarification. Deputy Balash asked the question, I think he meant it rhetorically, but I don't think it needs to be rhetorical, which is, should we ignore that referendum? Of course, there were two referendums, one in 2013, one in 2014. The 2013 one resulted in a mandate from the public to adopt what is basically the system that we currently have, which is a compromise of sorts between different competing priorities and what people would like to see in an electoral system. Should we ignore that referendum result? My view is no, we shouldn't, until there is some kind of fresh mandate, as the Deputy says. The reason that this amendment is on the table is because there is an attempt in the Assembly to ignore that previous referendum and go back to the option that came dead last in in that referendum, which 80% of people who voted in it, which is the greatest democratic mandate there is for any electoral change, and that can be dismissed as not statistically relevant, as if barely attended meetings in parish halls are relevant. The greatest democratic exercise in asking the public what they'd like for an electoral system. Option C, which is the system that P2 asked us to revert to, came last with 80% of the public voting against it. And through that referendum, the majority, through the ranked voting system, got to adopting option B, which was for deputies in districts and the constables. So I didn't vote for that winning option in that referendum. I voted for option A because, and I retain this as my position, the obvious, cleanest, fairest and most equitable voting system is for one kind of member elected on an equal basis. And I have never heard a rational argument against that. But, sir, since we don't all agree on that, and as Deputy Balash said, there are innumerable permutations of electoral reform that we could come up with, it means that something's got to give. And some people have to compromise. And before the last election, sir, I compromised, and lots of other states members compromised, to say, OK, whilst simplicity and equality are our priorities, there are a significant amount of the population and significant membership of the States Assembly who also have a priority that the parishes should have direct representation in the Assembly through the role of constable. And I was prepared to say at that time, as a majority of states members were, that in the name of progress, in the name of getting a cleaner system, a more democratic one, I'll compromise on that point about wanting one member on an equal basis and say, let's combine it with those who say, let's have direct parish representation in the form of the constables, and we'll distribute those deputies as far as is possible to get as much equity as we can. And that's the system that we adopted for the 22 election. It was a compromise of those who want equality of votes and those who want parish representation. But as Deputy Cole said in his opening speech, which what I thought was an excellent analogy about the tradesperson who you want to be quick, cheap and good, but you can't have all three of those. Realistically, you can only pick two. So is that also the case in our voting system. Because if you want island-wide voting, which is a perfectly sensible thing to argue for. There are all kinds of virtues in island-wide voting, the greater say that you give to the public, the island-wide focus on that election. They're all really good arguments. I've always found it weird that they're such good arguments. You don't want to apply them to 40 out of 49 of our members. I think that's an intellectual inconsistency, if you ask me. But accepting that there are good arguments for island-wide voting, but you cannot fit that in a unicameral chamber like ours alongside voter equality and direct parish representation. You can only fit two into that system. If you have island-wide and parishes, you will not have the scope to distribute the deputy seats properly to make sure that there's around about the same number of electors per representative in the system. It becomes mathematically too difficult. That is why those of us who want voter equality cannot buy into that compromise, because it's not a compromise. You don't get that core voter equality if you want island-wide and direct parish representation. And so the point of this amendment is that it proposes an alternative compromise. It proposes the other two elements that can go together, which is voter equality and island-wide representation. You can do that in our system, and it will be pretty clean, not as clean as one member on an equal basis, but as clean as what we've currently got, a two-tier system, and you can get voter equality in that. So that is an alternative compromise. And here's the thing, sir, is in actual fact, I could take or leave that as a strong push to adopt that system of just senators and deputies. I'm actually not that bothered about it. But having bent over backwards, frankly, to accept the compromise with the parish representation to get better voter equality, for that now to be kicked back in our face to say, actually, you'll get no voter equality And instead, we're going to go back to a three-tier system for which there is no rational explanation for, which the public rejected 80% to 20% in 2013, and get told that there's no public consultation on this is just laughable. Then that compromise is broken, and so we argue for a different compromise instead. But the fact of the matter is that we're actually okay with the current compromise. I'll say to the constables, Deputy Cole spoke of his fondness for working with them. I'm very fond of working with constables as well. We've had some fantastic times and some really good work has been done. It's great having two constables on the Council of Ministers as full ministerial roles. They're contributing really well in that sense. And I know that some people have views about whether constables should be ministers or just focusing on their parishes, but I think it's working well at the moment. In the last Assembly, when the original electoral reform debate by the then Deputy Russell Abbey was proposed, which was to remove the constables, 20 members voted in favour of that. 20. It was 5 short of the majority that would have seen the constables be removed. That's actually reasonably close, and with the passage of time may have got even closer. But we backed out of that and chose the compromise that kept the constables for the sake of greater voter equality, to get a proper majority to improve our system. Without that compromise baked in, it is, I think, a matter of time before the constables were removed, because the desire for island-wide voting, I think, over time would probably become more pressing and more desired from the public for all of the good reasons that there are for it. And so it's actually my view that in maintaining the current system, where we have a good level of voter equity because of the distribution of the deputies, with the parish representation as a fair and decent system that respects Jersey's culture and our heritage, and retains that long-standing position, that's something that could carry on for a while. And you'll note it's not something that, outside of the debates on senators, that Reform Jersey's bothered pushing. Even though it's our policy, there's not obviously overwhelming mandate for that change, and so we've not prioritised it, because instead we've been prioritising the stuff that actually matters to people more, which is access to healthcare, affordable housing, the stuff that actually we should be spending our time talking about, rather than this navel-gazing stuff. So, sir, that is the point of this amendment, sir. It's not to say, great, let's just go ahead and remove the constables from the Assembly and do that in complete disregard to the role that they play in the Assembly and the good work that we often do alongside them. It's to recognise that their presence in this electoral system is part of a strong compromise that had lots of good buy-in. Buy-in from those who want voter equality and buy-in from those who want direct parish representation through the roles of the constables. If you break that compromise, those who support voter equality have no reason to stay around and have a good reason for looking for an alternative, and that alternative does not mean keeping the constables. It said if you want to bring back senators, okay, but the obvious trade-off then is through the constables, because you can't have decent voter equity in the rest of the system. If that's to be the trade-off, so be it. I'm not of the view that it would be the death knell to the parish system. I think the parish system is strong and robust enough to survive without being on life support by having the heads of the parishes as automatic members of the States Assembly. I think it would do well without, and I think you'd end up with a mix of some constables who would run for the States as well and get elected with the permission of their electorate, and if that's how it is to be, then that's fair and democratic. And if you run for one but don't get the other, that's democracy. And you may well have some people putting their name forward for constable who actually really like the idea of getting stuck in the parish role but haven't the faintest interest in doing the political stuff and all of the work that comes with that, often which is not very fun and often which is very divisive and unpleasant. So you might get a different kind of character coming forward who's capable of doing a really good job in the parish system. But at the end of the day, it's unnecessary, because right now we have a voting system that works pretty well, gives good voter equality, but if you're going to step backwards in time, don't expect the others who bought into that compromise to stick around for it, because it will not lead to us having a good, clean, fair and democratic system. There are only two options really: voter equality and parishes, or voter equality and senators. This amendment provides a choice between those compromises. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. I note the time. Is the adjournment proposed?
Propose the adjournment.
Members content to adjourn until tomorrow morning? The Assembly is adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.